I think we're ready to roll here. We're going to start with a departmental bill from Department of Natural Resources. Is Secretary Kurtz here? Okay, Secretary, why don't you come up either to the podium or the witness stand? We've got a panel of, and again, we're starting with Senate Bill 258, and we've got Emily Mendenhall here, Secretary Kurtz, William Dwyer. Those are the witnesses that signed up. It looks like we got an additional. What's your name?
All right, this is Emily and Randy. There's just, I'm not sure who's, we're just going to move the laptop and stuff.
Okay. Then we're good. So, Mr. Secretary, you are the in-person witnesses for this bill, Senate Bill 258, and take the time you need to present it. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for having me this afternoon. For the record, I'm Josh Kurtz, the Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources. I'm here today testifying in support of SB 258, Natural Resources Fishing Licenses, Stamps, and Stamps Alterations. I'm joined today by Tony Prochaska, our Associate Director of Fishing and Boating at the end here, and we have some of our staff from our Fiscal Administrative Services if there are any questions. The legislation in front of you would provide targeted increases to some of the department's recreational fishing licenses, of which the trout stamp and senior consolidated license have not been adjusted since 1992 and others since 2007. The department's fishing and boating services, and more specifically for this legislation, our freshwater fisheries and hatcheries division, is a dedicated team of passionate professionals. These are people that work really hard to understand the science and make management decisions to ensure that we've got thriving populations of these fish species, and also ensure that we've got thriving recreational access opportunities. We do research, we do population surveys, habitat assessments, a wide range of things. And really our freshwater fisheries program is focused on our brook trout, which is our only native salmonid, and we're working to really restore that population across the state. We also focus in on invasive species mitigation there and really boosting recreational opportunities, especially for our youth. Our fishing licenses and stamps really fund that mission. DNR is primarily a user pay, user benefit model, and these funds are collected from user groups, and it goes back directly to supporting the research that these user groups use. To give you an idea of that, we have about 130,000 adult anglers representing all jurisdictions of the state. I'm a proud holder of one of these fishing licenses, and I'm also love to fly fish for trout myself. So really, I think it's a fantastic opportunity. Really also important economically. We see about $400 million in the state's economy directly from freshwater fishing expenditures. And we're really proud of this legacy here in Maryland. And what this bill does, is it allows us to increase these fees so that we're able to remain financially solvent, frankly, to be able to deliver these programs for all Marylanders. We have been looking at this for several years, and we've brought together a work group consisting of our advisory bodies, 2 members of which are joining me today, to discuss this, because we really wanted to ensure that we had fair and reasonable fees and allow us to continue to grow these programs. And so what this will allow us to do is continue to invest in our hatcheries across the state, continue to invest in the science we need, and really help us tackle the Chesapeake Chana challenge that we have that's impacting these species. And so with that, I will turn it over to some of my colleagues, but want to thank you for hearing the bill and would request a favorable report on SB 258. Thank you.
Okay, tell us who you are, and you all aren't going to be timed. We'll move to timing some future bills, but okay, tell us your name.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Emily Mendenhall, and I'm a constituent, and I also voluntarily, as a constituent, sit on the Cold Water Fisheries Advisories Council with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, because I care so much about our cold water fisheries, all the fisheries, but that one in particular. So I am here to speak as a resident, a citizen of Maryland, and a multi-year license holder of the non-tidal fisheries license and trout stamp. And I'm an active beneficiary of the work from the MDMR that the funds raised by these licenses enable. I think we understand that our support of this bill and its sister bill in the House means that we and other anglers recreating in Maryland's non-tidal waters will be paying more for the licenses to do so. We're fully in support of that increase, and we believe that our fellow anglers and all the potential anglers who benefit from the multitude of services that those license fees paid for should be and will be also. We'd certainly feel the loss if we decided not to support this bill and lost those services in our state. We Marylanders and visiting anglers alike benefit from the MDMR's efforts in environmental review, research, population surveys, water quality assessment, management, control of invasive species, population restoration, technical guidance, education and outreach, and fisheries access maintenance. It's a lot of work that these fees pay for. It's not just access to fish. And it's this work that provides for the continued health of our non-tidal waterways and their surrounding ecosystems and allows us to fish here. Up to this point, I'd say it's frankly impressive that we've continued to receive such quality support and work and these benefits from the MDNR team on the budget of licenses that have not been adjusted for continuous needs or inflation for 18 years in the license and 33 years since the trout stamp, and that's correct. The license holders have not seen an increase since 2007 and 1992. I'm 35 years old. I was 2 years old when these licenses were set at their current price. The costs of this work have, like the costs of everything in our lives, increased over the last 33 years. In order for us to continue to receive the services throughout our non-tidal fisheries, we need to properly fund them with licenses that are priced accordingly. I'll be quick. I just want to mention this. Averaged over the past 3 years, more than 220,000 freshwater fishing licenses were sold annually in our state, with the overwhelming majority of them sold to Maryland residents. Those fishing in non-tidal waters access streams, rivers, lakes, et cetera, in each and every county across our wonderful state that are monitored, maintained, and overseen by the MDNR and paid for by the funds raised from these licenses. And it truly must be said, even those not fishing benefit from this work, as they have healthy waters to kayak and wade in, accessible clean ecosystems to walk and hike through, and access to the scientific research and monitoring protections to rely on. These non-tidal waters, fisheries, and ecosystems are a treasured resource for all Marylanders and visitors to our state. We support the continued health of them with the support of this bill, and I want to thank you for your time and support of it.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. I'm Randy Dwyer. I reside in Senate District 22 and am represented by State Senator Alonzo Washington. As chairman of the Mid-Atlantic Council of Trout Unlimited, I'm here today representing 4,000 Trout Unlimited members across the state of Maryland. At our most recent board meeting, the Mid-Atlantic Council reviewed and discussed, the proposed license fee increases and voted unanimously to support the fee increase found in SB 258. As mentioned, Mid-Atlantic Council and its 4,000 member anglers are avid outdoors men and women, and we recognize the funding shortfalls before the Department of Natural Resources and the need to maintain its programs. The non-tidal fishing license fee has not been increased, as mentioned earlier, since 2007, 17 years ago, and the trout stamp has not been increased since 1992, 32 years ago. What does that mean for me personally? As a recent retiree, I've been paying $5 annually for the last several years. With the proposed fee increases, my future license will be $12 annual fee plus a $20 trout stamp fee. That's a total of $32 annually. This proposed annual fee, $32, costs less than 4 McDonald's Happy Meals, and it's a fee I'm more than willing to pay. It also helps keeps DNR's Freshwater Fisheries and Hatcheries Division in a strong operational position. The Mid-Atlantic Council of Trout Unlimited is a conservation organization comprised of multiple local trout chapters across Maryland. This includes Maryland TU, Patapsco Valley TU, Patuxent TU in southern, central, and eastern Maryland, Seneca Valley TU, National Capital TU in northern and central Maryland, and Yakagani TU in western Maryland. We are everywhere. Again, we have 4,000 members statewide. The Mid-Atlantic Council and our Trout Unlimited chapters have worked closely with DNR in the past and hope to continue to do so to make sure the future to improve cold water conservation, protect of native and wild trout management, and identifying cold water habitats in the future continues. In closing, the Mid-Atlantic Council of Trout Unlimited supports the proposed fee increases in Senate Bill 258 and urges its passage by the committee as well as by the full Senate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are you testifying, sir?
No, sir. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Tony Prochaska, Fishing and Boating Services, Maryland Department of Natural Resources. I'm just here to assist with questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll take questions now on Senate Bill 258 for any of the panelists. Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 258. And we're going to next move to Senator Bailey here yet? Okay, Senator Bailey, we've got 6 Senator Bailey bills, and we're going to start Senator with Senate Bill 23. Right, I've got Jeffrey Hayes signed up. Is Mr. Hayes here?
Yes, he is, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we'll bring Mr. Hayes up. And again, now we're on Senate Bill 23. Senate Bill 23.
I just want to take one quick moment, and to Mr. Chair and all the members of the committee, I want to thank you in advance for your attention to the fact that we have 6 natural resource bills today. You know, I spent a lot of time working out there, and I just appreciate it. I appreciate the secretary who was just here. We worked very diligently, and we were actually able last week to get rid of 2 additional bills through the cooperation of the department, and we've had a very constructive dialogue on all of these bills. Starting with Senate Bill 23 to Mr. Chair and members of the committee, Senator Bailey representing St. Mary's and Calvert County for the record. This bill would exempt auctioneers from the requirement to obtain a dealer's license in order to auction a boat in the state of Maryland. I've heard from many auctioneers whose businesses have been negatively affected by this requirement. I have with me Mr. Jeff Hayes, who is an auctioneer, and he will tell you of his story. But these auctioneers only auction a few boats a year. And what the requirement states is if they're going to auction a single boat, they have, under current law, it's not like selling a car. You have to actually become bonded. You have to actually do a lot of work to be bonded to be able to auction one boat. And we see what happens to a lot of these boats that are in auction. They end up floating down the river, thrown off on the side of the road. So what we did was we treated this as many areas of the law. The transportation article includes language specifically exempting auctioneers from the definition of a dealer in the context of buying and selling vehicles. This provision of the bills are modeled after this exemption, the same one under the transportation article, to make sure these 2 sections of laws are consistent and everybody on all these professionals understand the sale of these. It's important to note that this bill only applies if the title does not pass to the auctioneer. It is specifically for situations where the auctioneer is acting as an intermediary to what would otherwise be a private sale and does not require the seller to be licensed. This requirement is something that in my belief, just makes common sense. I will turn this over to Mr. Hayes, and I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 23, and we will stand for any questions.
I think I'd like to thank everybody for having me here today to speak. With this bill, my name is Jeffrey Hayes. I'm with Hayes Auction Services in Mechanicsville, Maryland.
Mr. Hayes, I should say you're going to be on the clock, okay? 2.5-minute clock, okay?
Very good. Thank you. I'm also a board director member on the Maryland Auctioneers Association. With that being said, real quick, just a few things. This bill makes total sense for everybody. The money stays in Maryland. That right now is going out of the state of Maryland. The taxes, the tags for boats and stuff that we could sell here be stayed here, so going Virginia, Florida, down the coast. And also with the tags for boats, the income stays in the state of Maryland. As I showed the income, it produces more income tax for the state of Maryland. It provides a service to our citizens of the state of Maryland where they don't have to travel out of state. It continues the partnership between DNR and with auctioneers right now. The Maryland Department of Natural Resources uses us as on mechanics liens. If you look up their paper, I print a copy off here, it asks for an auctioneer to sign off. That is accepted now for auctioneers to help them for boats that are left behind or whatever. And one of the biggest things too, we see older boats that are left behind. We get some older boats and we're able to get them sold and place them in hands of people that can refurbish them, use parts off of them, and dispose of them correctly instead of just being dumped everywhere. We've all seen that happen periodically over the years on side of roads and private property and things, and just continue to put money back onto the taxpayer to have to clean that up. So we do that and help take care of that for the citizens in the state of Maryland. And the finish up, like I said, is just this bill just makes sense for everybody, all the citizens of Maryland. Stop letting our money go out to other states and let us keep the money here for our taxes, our tags, our income. It just makes sense to have this go through. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for sponsor, Senator Bailey or Mr. Hayes on Senate Bill 23? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 23. Thank you. We're going to next move to, again, to Senator Bailey, Part 2, Senate Bill 76. Senator Bailey, we've got two in-person panelists. We've got Robert Brown and David Wheatley. And so if they're here, we can bring them up. We do have one additional virtual witness signed up favorable, which we'll get that witness next. Let's start with so I called two names. I see three. Who did I not call? Who do we got?
We have one person, Jimmy, did not get the chance. He tried to sign up yesterday.
Okay.
So if we could.
We talked about that. Okay,
Yeah.
we're good.
I'll be
Everybody will be
brief.
on. I'm sorry?
I'll be brief, sir.
Okay, good. Okay, and you all are going to be on a 2.5-minute clock. Senator, you get to take all the time you need to present the bill, Senate Bill 76, and then we'll go to the witnesses. And then we'll take up the virtual witness after that, okay?
So Senator Jack Bailey, representing St. Mary's and Calvert County, for the record, and I'm here today to talk to you about Senate Bill 76. And we have talked about this bill in the past. We have had different versions. This bill would reform the administrative penalty system for commercial oyster authorizations under Title 4, 1210 of the Natural Resource Article. I want to tell you that following the hearings that we had last year, we worked through the interim. We appreciate this committee. We appreciate the President's office. And we also appreciate the Department of Natural Resources because the language that is provided to you is as a result of the cooperation that we worked on with the department. I will tell you, though, I'm going to tell you a quick story about how we got here. I'm going to tell you the story of a couple watermen. One in particular is the Waterman of the Year this year for St. Mary's County, who is Mike Hayden. And Mike Hayden was actually harvesting oysters from his own property. And when I tell you that he was harvesting from his own property, I want to read to you from his parents' deed from 1966. And as you get down there, he lives in St. Mary's County, an avenue on the side of White Neck Creek. And together with the use of the bottom of White Neck Creek for oyster planting and cultivation within the areas thereof found lying beneath an extension of the southeasterly and northwesterly lines of the land above described to the center of the aforesaid creek. And I've talked to you all about this in the past, and I just want you to understand that Mr. Hayden, who is actually, he and his wife, Teeny, are going to be a virtual witness, but their family actually owns the bottom of White Neck Creek. And that is something everybody says, well, the water ebbs and flows. The water is owned by the state. But if the mouth of the creek is less than 200 feet across, then each property owner on either side own the bottom. They actually own the oysters. Now, this is relevant to this discussion because Mr. Hayden received a ticket from the Natural Resource Police for harvesting his own oysters that he and his father had purchased and planted on their property. And he got a ticket as a result of going out there and harvesting that. Now, when that ticket came to court, the state's attorney sat down and evaluated the case, and they dismissed the case. There was no prosecution and no criminal conviction. But guess what? Bless you. but bless you, there was an administrative finding and a revocation. And when I take a second to read you the revocation, it says, based upon the above findings of fact and discussion, I conclude as a matter of law that DNR's revocation of the respondent's authorization to harvest oysters under any Title Fish license and the permanent revocation of his entitlement to engage in any commercial oystering activity is proper, right? I order that DNR, the order from the court, I order that DNR's permanent revocation of the respondent's authorization to harvest oyster under any Title Fish license and the permanent revocation of his, very important word, entitlement to engage in any commercial oystering activity is affirmed. So he lost the opportunity through an administrative action to ever be entitled to oyster. Now, I've got to take you to the definition under Maryland DNR's definition of entitlement. Entitlement means to engage in a particular activity or activities under a Title Fish license. Means the privilege to engage in commercial fishing activities without holding a Title Fishing license. Very important, without holding a license. And includes the privilege to work as a crew member or other assistance to a Title Fish license. So ladies and gentlemen, what this says is that guess what? We've given you an administrative action. And based on that administrative action, you can never, ever participate in anything to do with an oyster. The bottom line is you can't even drive a pickup truck with oysters in the back of it. We're going to hear from Mr. Wheatley. He wasn't even the captain of a boat. He can't work at all based on this revocation, right? This is how significant this is when we talk about the entitlement. Now, this also means that he can't even hold an aquaculture license. And I know in this committee, you all hear a lot about aquaculture. Now, they applied, their family applied for a aquaculture license in 2017. But because of this conviction, and it wasn't until we started hearing this until 2023, were they even allowed to get a license back on their own property, right? From 2017 to 2023 because of an administration action on their own property. Now, I just want to point out that the disparity that exists, because as you all have heard, aquaculture permit holders are not Title Fish license holders. So this does not apply to aquaculture holders. People that are helping the Chesapeake Bay, we know them, I represent a bunch of them, but I just want you to know how much disparity exists, because if that aquaculture license holder goes into a sanctuary, which we have plenty of examples, they don't have a commercial license to put this administrative action on. And guess what? They go in a sanctuary, they take wild oysters, the police catch them, and next week, next month, they're still out there harvesting on their aquaculture. This is not fair, ladies and gentlemen, to what we are doing to this. Now, I want to give a lot of credit, and the reason I've got to be thorough about this is clearly in the past I wasn't thorough enough. Right? And I want to make sure that everybody understands the stakes, because when I looked at the people that are going to oppose this bill, even though the department is not, right? I want to make sure that everybody understands from when this law came in 2011 to all the things that changed since then, right? This Senate bill will end the practice of permanently revoking a commercial oyster authorization through an administrative procedure. Instead, it allows DNR to suspend an individual's authorization for an established period of time. That was one thing I didn't make crystal clear, was the fact that Mr. Hayden's suspension is for lifetime. And there is no way to get it away. He could never again, unless we move forward on a bill like this, right? Guess what? Each and every one of us have worked with second chances. We've seen it in every one of our 10 years here. And that exists for every crime out there, except if you've committed an oyster violation, right? There has to be some time when people have paid their debt to society. Now, under this bill, their authorization can be suspended from 2 years for a first offense. So we can still suspend them for 2 years, first offense. And any subsequent offense, right, if they do it twice, they can lose their license for up to 10 years, right? So I think we have not looked at this lightly. This bill also provides a pathway for individuals who have previously lost their authorization to participate in the fishery. I'm submitting with this bill an amendment to clarify the provision of the bill to ensure that they align with the intent of what we submitted to bill drafting. We submitted, ladies and gentlemen, we submitted entitlement to engage as defined under COMAR, and that the bill drafter didn't realize that there was that there was actually a regulation to cover entitlement, so they changed the words. And changing the words significantly changed that. That's why we have put that back in. This provision only applies to revocations under 4.12.10 and does not affect licenses who had received suspensions based on points or other sections of the natural resource articles, and these penalties are based on criminal convictions. Absolutely, I believe in due process. If there's a criminal conviction, and we've worked quite a bit with that. I know that you will hear from some people today who have concerns about this legislation. I'd like to first draw your attention to top of page 4 when we talk about the fiscal note. In establishing the financial impact of this bill, DLS believes that there will be a small increase in cost. The impact is because under the bill, DNR likely will be able to pursue additional cases. Those that are not egregious enough to warrant a permanent revocation under the current law, but that warrant a suspension. So when this administrative action passed in 2011, I would like to go back and just remember that time just a little bit. And I have, obviously, you all know that I was a natural resource police officer. And the fact is, I ran at that time the undercover operations, right? And we didn't talk a lot back then. So the situation was that there were some things that hadn't, were broken. And I'll tell you, one of the interstate cases that I did and how that this law got to where it is right now is we had defendants. It was a fish case. We had defendants in many different jurisdictions. And all the other states had the ability to suspend and revoke people's, they provoked their ability to work on the water. But Maryland didn't have that opportunity. There were some big holes in that. And what happened as a result, I was in Virginia and you heard on the radio all these talk shows, everybody making fun of the Department of Natural Resources, making fun of the General Assembly, making fun of the fact that looks what's happened in Maryland. They're still on the bottom and nobody pays any attention. And we came in, and let me tell you, we drove that nail with not a hammer, but a sledgehammer. And we made a big impact. But what I would tell you is that was 14 years ago. And there are so many things that have occurred in the last 14 years. That's why I'm asking you to revisit this. And one example that I'm going to give you, and you all know about it, is M-Line. right, which M-Line is the radar surveillance system that monitors the sanctuaries, right? The state of Maryland and this body has spent millions and millions of dollars to do that. In 2011, when this law that we're talking about was passed, it didn't exist. And guess what happens now? If a person enters a sanctuary, the Natural Resource Police get a notification and they're able to go out there, right? We have done a lot with technology. We also updated and worked with the entire revocation system. We established and worked on the point system. I, sitting there with the members of DNR in the building when I worked for them, worked on that point system. The points for each offense are established by regulation, and they give DNR great discretion in establishing the seriousness of a crime and its punishment. And this point system has been updated several times since its implementation. But again, these points can only be given as a result of a criminal conviction through the criminal process that carries with it the presumption of innocence. Now, many of you have heard, and you might hear, well, in the good old boy system, the prosecutors just now pros and they don't pay any attention. Well, let me tell you, we addressed that. We addressed that right here, right? In the General Assembly in 2021, we passed Senate Bill 324, which provides more transparency in how environmental and natural resource crimes are not only enforced, right, but how they're viewed. We spent a lot of time in 2021, you all remember, talking about that. Then again in 2023, we passed Senate Bill 611, which created the Environmental and Natural Resource Crimes Unit in the Attorney General's office. And it gave them concurrent jurisdiction. So it wasn't just the state's attorney, right, who was able to say whether somebody was prosecuted for an environmental or natural resource crime. It can be done by the Attorney General and their specialists and their special investigators. As I have stated before this committee, I don't believe that a person should have their livelihood permanently taken away without a criminal conviction. While I am concerned about a person losing their livelihood for any length of time without a conviction, limiting the amount of time a waterman's authorization is suspended will allow for a second chance, something that our state has provided in so many other areas of the law. This legislation addresses my primary concern with the law as currently written and strikes a balance between the need to protect the rights of commercial watermen and protect oysters in our waterways. I want to thank DNR for their willingness to review, consider changes to the process, to the many meetings we had. I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 76 with this amendment and the fact as we've stated in this committee many times before, the kumbaya moment that we had with DNR. You will be hearing from these hardworking watermen, the Haydens, about their personal experience, and you're also going to hear from David Wheatley, who lost his entitlement opportunity through this process. And as I was saying, he was not even the captain of the boat. He was just a person on a boat that was in the wrong place, and he lost it for a lifetime. And that's just not what I think us as legislators was our intention. I appreciate all the hard work that people did back in 2011, but as I have stated, we have done a lot of work and a lot of things to move forward. Thank you, and thank you for the extra time.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to the three witnesses, and we do have the one virtual witness as well. Sign up favorable. Sir, tell us your name, and each are going to be on the 2.5-minute clock, okay?
My name is Robert T. Brown. I'm president of the Maryland Watermen's Association. I'd like to have a favorable on Senate Bill 76. Does the penalty fit the crime? That is what this bill is all about. You know, these hard penalties that they've got taking a man's livelihood for a lifetime over a crime is a long period of time, plus the money that they lose during the wintertime. As you know, Lady Justice You see her statue at some courthouses and other places. And she's got a blindfold on. She's got a balance of weights in her hand. And she's also got a sword, and it's pulled out the sheath. And that's to stop anybody from messing with those scales or taking her blindfold off so she could see what's what and make sure everybody gets a fair shake. And that's what we're looking for here, is a fair shake, not a penalty that does not fit the crime. Right now, if a man oysters and he's got a 12 bushel limit person and $40 a bushel, that's $480 a day for him. Now, some of these people have lost their licenses or privilege to oyster for over 5 years, and that's a long period of time. To put it in a different way is, take for instance, this man, he was working into a sanctuary or he was doing something that he wasn't supposed to do. He was wrong. He's done his time, paid his fine, but yet he is still being penalized. I'll give you an example. That's what he did. If a man comes in with a gun and goes into a convenience store, robs them at gunpoint, and takes whatever he wants, cash out, and goes outside, and he goes to court and he's either pleads guilty or found guilty, he doesn't get a lifetime sentence. And here, these working men, yes, they made a mistake, they've done the time, paid their dues, they are not allowed to go back to work now. So I'm asking that make this penalty go away so it's justifiable. And that's what we're looking for, is a justifiable crime, not a lifetime sentence. Thank you very much.
Okay, sir. We're going to go next to you again, 2.5 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you all very much for giving me the privilege to speak here today. My name is David Thomas Wheatley II. I am a commercial waterman. I received a lifetime revocation for being a mate on a boat, and I understand that conservation is very important to our ecosystem. I understand without that ecosystem, there is not a waterman or anything like that, and I have lost a lot of livelihood over the past 7 or 8 years over one sanctuary ticket. I've never had a crabbing ticket. I've never had a fishing ticket. I've never had a deer hunting ticket. But I got one oyster ticket that gave me a lifetime revocation. All I'm asking for is a second chance, and I hope you all can understand that. And thank you very much for hearing me today.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair. I'm Jim Mullen with the Maryland Oystermen's Association. And as Senator Bailey referenced, we are a society of second chances. And as legislators, you're always updating laws and ordinances over time. And all we're requesting is to update this law from 2011 that came across very heavy-handed. I think one point that needs to be brought out is the suspension, once it would be completed, you don't automatically get your authorization back. You get the privilege to get in line to wait for one that comes available. So I just wanted to make you aware of that, is if they're your suspension of 2 years or 10 years, you just don't get it back. You have the privilege to get in line to wait for one that can be issued. So I think that's important to understand, that nobody's going to get right back out there. They have to wait in line till one becomes available. So we ask for a favorable report, again, just to update our laws here in the state and ordinances. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's take questions for the senator or the panelists before we go to the virtual witness who signed up favorable. We'll start with Senator Carrozza and then Vice Chair King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this legislation. And I really appreciate the effort to work through some really tough issues in the interim. And so for the bill sponsor, Senator Bailey, from your working with the Department of Natural Resources, and it might be an obvious question, but I think it needs to be on the record. The only way to change the current situation, it does require legislation. Is that your understanding?
That is correct. It does require. We have had numerous meetings with the department and their attorneys, and the actual wording that is before you with the amendment is exactly what the Department of Natural Resource attorneys provided to us.
So this has been a good faith effort working with the department to reach this point, including the amendments. Is that correct?
That's correct. The amendment was actually, brings it back to the exact wording that we submitted. As I was saying, for some reason, bill drafting just changed the wording, and we had to go back to correct it.
Specifically, the reinstatement of a person's entitlement to engage in the oyster
Yes.
fishery.
Yes.
So from your testimony, we would need this bill in order to change the fact that at this point, that you have this permanent revocation of a license, which would affect a person's livelihood, that this bill, focusing on this, the only way to change this permanent revocation to allow for other penalties is through the legislation as written. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we also have the point system now, that now the point system and the administrative system would be much more in tune to work forward.
And that was worked through with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources?
Everything was discussed with the Department of Natural Resources.
Okay.
It can't be clear they provided this wording.
Okay, thank you.
This is their wording together.
I think we got the message. Okay, Vice Chair Kagan.
Mr. Chair. Senator, you're clearly very passionate about this, and I understand both the need for people to have second chance, and I understand that there are consequences, and that's why we have jails and all that. My question is unrelated to that. On page 2, lines 10 and 11, taking oysters with gear that is prohibited in that area, so the prohibited area, while more than 200 feet within the prohibited area. So I understand the, oops, I'm 5 feet inside the no oyster zone. I got distracted, all that. 200 feet seems like a lot. And so I wonder if you can tell us how you came up with that number. Is that elsewhere? Do other states find that an appropriate number? That just seems like a really flagrant violation.
So if you happen to take a look at line 8,
Yep,
you will see the 200 feet.
yep.
And that is not a change.
Right.
Right. And as I stated just a few minutes ago, that this wording is the work of the Department of Natural Resources. This is not Senator Bailey's wording. This is how can we address the problems. And quite frankly, 200 feet when you're in a body of water that is miles across is a pencil width. It is extremely, not a huge distance. It's an extremely quick 200 feet is not even a football field. And a football field, when you're on a city block, might very well look like a big stadium. Put that stadium in the middle of Chesapeake Bay, and you can look right past it. Right, so it's all relevant, but 200 feet, I think, is a good compromise.
That's helpful. Good answer. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, additional questions for this panel, the Senator? Okay, thank you, guys. We're going to move to the virtual witness. We've got Teenie Hayden signed up favorable. Okay, somebody hear audio? Teenie Hayden?
Yes,
Video. Okay, we can
Ladies and
hear you,
gentlemen.
so we can't see you, but you can still talk. We can hear your testimony. You got 2.5 minutes, and you've signed up favorable, okay?
Okay, thank you. My name is Teeny Hayden, and I am here today to testify because my husband, George Hayden, had his oyster license taken 8 years ago. This was in 2017. These 8 years have been a tremendous hardship on us, but not only on us, our son as well, as he has had to make a lot of sacrifices in these 8 years as well. To take a waterman's oyster license away for life is a real stiff penalty, especially when they have been a waterman for all their life, over 45 years. And also have held a Maryland, Potomac, and Virginia license with no infractions prior to this happening in 2017. And to this day, 8 years ago, still has no infractions and no criminal history. Therefore, I am asking you to please consider and to be in favor of this bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hayden, any questions for the virtual witness? Okay, seeing none. Okay, thank you, guys. We do have some unfavorable testimony. I'm going to call up Genevieve Block and Allison Colden. And then we do have one virtual witness by the name of Brian Frosch in the queue. So we're going to take our two in-person unfavorables. Genevieve Block, why don't you start, and then we'll go to Ms. Colden next. And each of you is going to be 2.5 minutes, and then we'll take our former Attorney General here.
Good afternoon. My name is Genevieve Block, and I am here representing...
Could you put that mic a little closer?
Sure. Is that better? Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Genevieve Block, and I'm here representing the Environmental Law Clinic at the University of Maryland Francis King Carey School of Law. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairwoman, and members of the committee for the opportunity to provide testimony in opposition of Bill 76, which would change administrative penalties for violations of Maryland's fishery laws. This position is presented in collaboration with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and is submitted on behalf of the Environmental Law Clinic at the University of Maryland and not by the School of Law or the University of Maryland at Baltimore or the University of Maryland system. For years, Maryland has vigorously protected and promoted its natural resources, especially its oyster populations, which are now at historically low levels. Currently, Maryland stands alongside other Chesapeake Bay states in enforcing penalties against individuals who violate oystering laws. Maryland is not an outlier. Notably, Virginia imposes significantly harsher penalties than Maryland by mandating revocations for serious infractions and issuing multi-year bans for repeat offenders. Maryland's framework is both effective and equitable in addressing violations. Under the current system, individuals who receive a citation may have the option to prepay a fine and admit guilt, or can choose to go to district court. Further, if the Department of Natural Resources finds the violation egregious enough to revoke their license, the poacher will be notified within 90 days that they must go before an administrative judge and have a hearing. These hearings mirror judicial proceedings with due process safeguards that ensure equity for both parties. Maryland also goes to great lengths to educate its fishermen about where, when, and how they can harvest oysters and other shellfish. Each year, DNR provides their fishermen with an updated rulebook, which includes a set of comprehensive maps. Upon receipt of these materials, the fishermen must sign an affidavit acknowledging that they are aware of these laws. At the outset, Maryland provides its fishermen with the tools for success. They are not left unequipped. For these reasons, and those stated by others today, the University of Maryland Environmental Law Clinic opposes SB 76, as Maryland's existing framework maintains a fair balance between supporting its oystermen and deterring harmful poachers, thus safeguarding the state's precious oyster population. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Colton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Dr. Allison Colden, Maryland Executive Director at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and previously its Senior Fisheries Scientist in the context of today's testimony. Here today in opposition to Senate Bill 76. So as you've already heard, the department's authority to revoke an authorization to harvest oysters is not one that any waterman wants to invoke. And we're here to say that's precisely its purpose. The reason and the role of a strong deterrent to illegal harvest is not to have to wield it, but to prevent the illegal activity in the first place. But for those who knowingly and willingly violate the law, which is the standard that must be met, following through with revocation is the only means the department has to remove, quote, bad actors from the fishery. This is not just about conservation or sustainability of the oyster population. It's about protecting public investments, private property, and public health. I'll draw your attention to the written testimony of Dr. Donald Bosch, President Emeritus of UMCES, who details significant state and federal efforts on oyster restoration that are protected by these no-harvest sanctuaries. But the statute also protects oysters on aquaculture leases, which are placed there at the expense of private business owners. Illegal harvest from these leases is theft of private property. Lastly, removing oysters from an area closed to polluted waters puts public health at risk, as eating oysters from polluted waters can cause severe illness or even death in older or immunocompromised individuals. These incidents, which often make headlines, not only hurt those actually impacted by the illness, but also give a black eye to all of Maryland's seafood industry by undermining consumers' trust. Over the past 5 years, DNR has revoked authorizations in 4 cases and declined to pursue 14 others, indicating it generally declines to pursue revocation after considering an individual's past violation history and the egregiousness of the offense. This is thanks to the additional discretion that the General Assembly has afforded the department over the years and demonstrates that DNR does not take this authority lightly. Further, the current system aligns with other professional licensings, like for doctors and lawyers, in which conduct that is not becoming of the profession is met with a removal of the individual's ability to participate in that profession, aka their livelihood. We believe that maintaining a strong deterrent to oyster poaching is critical to protecting the environment, public health, and private property, and that the discretion afforded the department in the current statute strikes the appropriate balance. We urge an unfavorable report on Senate Bill 76. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Block, Dr. Colden? Okay, seeing none, thank you, which brings us to our final witness. We've got the our former Senator and former Attorney General, Brian Frosch. Good to see you. Mute yourself there, Brian. And you're signed up unfavorable, and you're going to be on the 2.5-minute clock once you there you go. Okay, unfavorable, and again, we're on Senate Bill 7.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Members, I appreciate the opportunity to testify remotely. I was the lead Senate sponsor on the law that is before you, and I wanted to give you some historical context. As a member of the Chesapeake Bay Commission in 2009, I visited, along with the other members, the Horn Point Lab. And the folks who ran that lab said to us at the time that the greatest threat to oysters in the Chesapeake Bay was not pollution. It was not disease. It was theft. Poachers had been devastating the oysters across the bay. And this law was intended as a strong deterrent to that kind of conduct. You should ask DNR whether theft has gone down since the law went into effect. If the answer is yes, and I believe it is, you can thank this bill. It's doing its job. If it hasn't gone down, you should ask yourselves whether this would be the right time to make it even easier on the folks who are committing this theft. And I say theft because each violation that warrants a revocation in licensure, it has to be knowing. DNR has to prove to an administrative law judge that the person who committed the violation knew what he or she was doing. And even though you have this 200-foot buffer for sanctuaries, which, along with the knowing requirement, ought to be more than enough to warrant serious. The law is fair. And I would point out that harvesting oysters from the Chesapeake Bay is a privilege. It's not a right. We're not talking about crime here. But when you consider that someone who is more than 200 feet inside a sanctuary and knowingly stealing oysters, that person ought to receive a harsh penalty. Same thing, knowingly taking oysters from an oyster bed that's been polluted and poses a health threat to people who might consume those oysters ought to warrant serious penalty. I think this bill goes too far. I think perhaps that there is room for allowing folks back into the fishery, but I think the penalties need to be much stiffer than the ones that this bill would allow, and the re-entry into the fishery should not be automatic. It should be subject to some form of discretion by the Department of Natural Resources. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for our former Attorney General? Okay, thank you for your testimony. That concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 76. We're going to next go to back to you, Senator Bailey. I'm going to come back up on Senate Bill 87. We've got Robert T. Brown up here. Come back up here, Mr. Brown. Signed favorable, and then we do have one witness unfavorable. So Senator Bailey, it's all yours, Senate Bill 87.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, Senator Jack Bailey, representing St. Mary's and Calvert for the record. Senate Bill 87 would expand the scope of the annual Young of the Year juvenile survey of striped bass by requiring this survey to be conducted in the central region of the Maryland waters of the Chesapeake Bay. This is an issue I know that many of you will likely recall, as this bill is identical to the legislation that Delegate Jacobs and I brought to you last year. Each year, the Department of Natural Resources conducts Young of the Year surveys, and they provide important scientific data on juvenile fish in our state's waterways. This data is critical to measuring the success of Maryland striped bass stocks and is used by DNR as a part of setting the state's fisheries management policies and its regulations. DNR has conducted this survey annually since 1954. This data is currently taken at sites in the Susquehanna Flats, in the northern portion of the Chesapeake Bay, and at several tributaries in the southern part of the bay, namely the Nanticoke, the Potomac, and the Patuxent Rivers. These have been the same locations where fish spawned and then have traditionally spawned for years. However, no surveys that are released to the public that we see are currently performed in the center of the bay. We know that spawning patterns have changed since these original survey sites were established. These gentlemen that are going to testify to you are the experts. They're the ones that are out there catching the fish every day. And they see there are many things that have affected us on the Chesapeake Bay. This committee talks all the time about sea level rise. We talk about the presence of invasive species. We talk about the chana. We talk about catfish. They all have a significant impact on the ecosystem of the bay. I think you're going to hear testimony from watermen that were actually running their catfish lines when the Department of Natural Resources was conducting the survey on juvenile rockfish, and they were so close together they could see each other. And here they are catching these catfish. And as if you all know, we're going to have a bill in a few minutes talking about catfish. These are the most invasive, hungry critters that exist out there in the Chesapeake Bay. And they are eating up everything. So, you know, nature devises a plan and a way to move. Right? And they are not going to allow those fish to be in the same place. This bill would give us more data to better inform our state's decision-making with regards to striped bass. This will give our state a fuller picture of fish spawning activity in the Chesapeake Bay by including data from all regions of the bay. These sites are intended to be supplemental to and not supplant or change. We don't want to change anything that they're doing. All we're simply saying is, based on all these factors, we want you to start recording and publishing exactly what you're seeing, right? So we can see if things change. And we all know at our age in life that things change. I have the management history for striped bass right here. And we know in 1954, that's when they started their juvenile survey for striped bass. And by 1970, we had a record of striped bass reproduction, right? We had record sport and commercial harvests all through the 70s, right? All of a sudden, 1981 came along, we had juvenile index drops to a low record, to a record low, right? All of a sudden, those of us that remember the 80s, you know that we lived in the 80s. We lived in a moratorium. These gentlemen, their families, they lost their way of life, right? And if you have seen what is happening, many of you saw what happened last year to the commercial industry. We had the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission and the Department of Natural Resources. We impacted the charter boat fishing industry. We took 75% of the charter boats out of business by the restrictions that we placed on striped bass. Ladies and gentlemen, if the Department of Natural Resources, and a lot of them are friends, I'm not saying they're doing a bad job, but they need to open up and start looking at other places. We're not mandating where those places are. We're just saying take a good look at the whole picture, right? And that's what this bill does. That's what this bill is intended to do. And I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 87 for the future of our striped bass and the commercial and recreational fishery in Maryland. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Ms. Brown.
Mr. Chair and members of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss this bill with you. Senate Bill 87 would like to have a favorable on it. I've started fishing back in the 60s with my brother, and when I was just starting into high school. And I've seen them when it was plenty, and I've seen them when it's been a shortage. However, over the past few years, what I am seeing is a change in the bay. And I'm talking about the climate, the water temperature, the red tides we get, also all these invasive catfish we have. Now, when these fish spawn out in the spring of the year and you have small little teeny tiny fingerlings, and they're trying to survive going up and down the shore, and these people are doing these surveys, which they do correctly, I have no doubt in that, but they do it the same time every year, in the same place every year, whether the tide's high or the tide's low. But now, if they go to one of these places and these catfish just happen to be moving down there, because there's plenty of them all over the place, these small fish have to move. They may go to deeper water. They may go back up in a cove. And they are missing some of these fish, we believe, because this past year, I've been seeing fish 10, 12, 14 inches showing up my nets, and we're releasing them alive. However, they're not showing up in the young of the year index, so we're missing it somewhere. That's one of the reasons we want more data. We don't want to change the data that they have. We don't want to change nothing that we're doing. We want them to add this to it or keep it separate. It makes no difference, but keep a record of doing it in different places and then compare it. Well, this is what you got now. You weren't catching them now? Well, how come you're catching them here then? Maybe it's because of the catfish. He eats anything he wants to. I mean, the biggest one I've seen is 99 pounds, and he eats pretty much anything he wants to, from frogs to snakes to crabs and everything else. He's the biggest predator we have on the bay at this present time. So we really need this data to hopefully that we can help to monitor it better. It would help with the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission keeping our quotas up to what it is and have the quota to where it is preserving and protecting not only the fishermen, but the people who are catching these fish. I ask for your support on this bill, and thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jim Mullen with the Maryland Oystermen's Association. I'm also in favor of this because we need to collect more data so we get better science, so we're guided by better science, and so we can make better decisions and conclusions with regard to the biology that's out in the bay. And so we have all these factors that are converging down on the bay, and if we're going to be guided by science and inspired by nature, then we got to have more biological data. We got to have more better science to make these decisions that are concrete and aren't haphazard, because we always hear that term in conclusion, we're only as good as the science we have. So we've got to collect more science and more data, and that's what this bill aspires to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Senator Bailey or the panel? Okay, thank you, guys. We've got one unfavorable witness from DNR, Lynn Fegley. And so why don't you yield the table to Ms. Fegley from DNR. And again, you're signed up unfavorable on Senate Bill 87.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. My name is Lynn Fegley. I'm the Director of Fishing and Boating Services at Maryland DNR. And while I really appreciate the testimony that you just heard, we are respectfully opposed the passage of Senate Bill 87, which directs the department to sample in specific areas during its annual striped bass juvenile survey. We fully understand the concerns around the status of the striped bass stock and around the need to gather the very best data. However, we feel that legislating our survey methodologies will ultimately do more harm than good. I want to start by saying that our existing Young of the Year survey is conducted at 22 survey sites located in the 4 largest spawning areas. That is the Upper Bay, the Potomac River, the Choptank River, the Nanticoke, and the Patuxent Rivers. These areas represent approximately 96% of the known spawning area in Maryland's Chesapeake Bay. This said, we have heard what people have said. We understand this concern about the perceived shift in distribution, and we are working to respond to that. Last summer, in 2024, DNR staff conducted fish surveys at 21 additional sites distributed through the West, Miles, Magathie, Patapsco, Road, and Tredavon rivers. And what we found there mirrored the results of our striped bass juvenile survey. And this is strong evidence that these rivers are not supporting large unknown populations of juvenile striped bass. And we really feel it's important to note that this period that we're seeing of low spawning success for striped bass is widespread. It's being reflected in surveys in New York, New Jersey, and Virginia. And most importantly, in response to this concern, next week, the Scientific and Technical Advisory Committee of the Chesapeake Bay Program has convened a workshop to look specifically at our bay surveys around striped bass to ensure that they are holding up to changing ecological conditions. My fear is if this workshop recommends that we make adjustments to our survey protocols or do something different, and we have this bill passed, we don't have the staff or resources to do both what's been legislated and what the workshop recommends. So with that, I will just request an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Senator Hester.
Question about the 7 waters that are in the actual bill text. So when you expanded from the 23 sites to include the additional site sampling, did you include like any of these specific waterways?
We did, and I don't have off the top of my head what the overlap was, but some of those, so the ones that we did sample in 2024 were the West, the Miles, the Magathie, the Patapsco, the Road, and the Tredavon rivers. And I think some of those are listed within the legislation. And I'll just say that we do have, one of the things that we do in fisheries service is we've got a lot of surveys running around the bay in any season. some of them are run using similar methodologies. So we leverage this as a way to cross-check ourselves. So these additional fish surveys that we did in 2024 have actually been done through time back at least a decade. So we have points in time where we can compare what we see in our juvenile survey to these additional sites, and they always mirror each other. So we do spend a fair bit of time, cross-checking the data that we get. We do not operate in a vacuum.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator Carozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I saw that there was testimony in support of this from the Talbot Watermen's Association and represented by former DNR Secretary Jeannie Hadaway-Riccio. And so, given the knowledge base there, and again, looking at trying to approach this as far as the additional information, we all know in our work that additional information can be helpful in our decision making. And then you mentioned this workshop group that, you're concerned that if the workshop group comes up with some ideas and you've got the legislation, this is not doable. I'm just trying to better understand. First of all, I would hope that are the watermen, especially a group like the Talbot Watermen's Association that does so much of this, shares their information and research. Are they at the table for this? And did you have an opportunity to, with DNR taking this position, talking to the Talbot Watermen's Association about their support and why they think this information would be helpful?
Yeah, so I guess I want to start by saying that we do not turn a blind ear and a blind eye to what watermen and charter boat captains and recreational anglers are observing on the water. That's very important. Those guys are on the water, they're fishing. We need to hear what they say, and we are extremely open. We encourage them regularly, get a hold of us. If there's something that we can come look at, we will gladly abide. We would love to see if you're seeing young fish over here, let's go take a look and see what species those are and validate. But where we want to be careful is making sure that the surveys that we're doing are sticking to these scientific protocols so that they can be applied in the coastal models upon which management is based. If we start to deviate too much and we lose, we sort of lose that rigor, then the data become, they wind up, in the end of the day, not meeting the criteria required to be included in these coastal models. So it's about the workshop. It is a scientific workshop. So no, there will not be anyone other than scientists at the table, but there will be, the public is going to be able to listen, and we certainly are. Like I said, we are open to what we are being told, and that's why we looked at these extra sites. That's why we started doing these comparisons. That's why we said, okay, let's get a peer review in here and examine our surveys. I mean, we really want to tackle this and make sure we have it right. We just want to follow a scientific process to make sure we stay on a track where the data are absolutely usable and applicable to the coastal models.
I would just like to think that the watermen would have more of a role than just, saying they can listen to the workshop. I mean, they, given, their livelihood and their knowledge and expertise and their approach. So it's just a little, just surprising that you would have opposition to just kind of an information data. That's just a little, it's hard as a policymaker to understand that opposition.
Since her name was invoked, I will acknowledge our former DNR secretary and former delegate and former seatmate of mine on the Economic Matters Committee, Jeannie Hadaway-Riccio. With that, Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there a portion of the survey that's in the central region today?
There is if you're defining the central region as the rivers, no, as the rivers that are listed in the legislation, there are not. But like I said, we are sampling in those rivers. It's just a different fisheries survey. That doesn't happen every year in every one of those areas. So we have the ability to compare what we're seeing in those rivers at points in time with our survey. We have so many we have numerous fishery surveys running at the same time. So we're able to and they're targeting different questions, but we are able to use them as a comparison to cross-check one another.
Are they about the rockfish?
Those surveys the additional surveys are conducted by our Fisheries Ecosystem and Assessment Division, and they are not specifically targeting rockfish, although they are using similar methods.
Okay,
so the survey is not designed to target rockfish, but they
so they're
encounter
not doing
rockfish.
what is being asked of in here then? I mean, because this is asking about the rockfish, right? And it's suggesting that we don't know what's happened with the youth of the rockfish in this central region. And we don't really have a good answer for that.
But we are running fisheries surveys. So I'm trying to think of analogy. So we're running 2 surveys. So it would be like, maybe we could think of it as running fishing crabbing gear in 2 different areas, or we've got these 2 surveys running. They are not designed to target the same animal, but they encounter
I understand
the
that.
same
So
animal.
my question for you would be, I mean, are you suggesting that our environment is static? I mean,
No,
I
not
just
at all.
don't, I can't, I really struggle with the suggestion of inflexibility when we know that these things are changing. I mean, I think in your testimony it even says you've had to change over the course of the 54 years some of the sites because things have changed. So if things have changed, right? I mean, it just seems like there's this inflexibility to look in this space. I'm struggling to understand that. Now I can see can you can help by saying, hey, we are going to look in this area, or I mean, what's the resistance to doing so?
So okay. So
data always start at one point, which creates a baseline. So please don't suggest that it somehow will damage your other data. It will not. Your other data is fine, but you can start a new data set, and you can absolutely do that. And start this to take a look at this area to see what's happening there.
So
would you agree?
Yes and no. So it's not about damaging our data. It is absolutely.
But that's what you said. You said that before, that it somehow would damage the rest of the survey.
So, I mean, I will say that there are criteria that the coastal models use, when they incorporate data into these models. And that includes things like the length of the time series. But let's leave that aside. I think what we're interested in is making sure that the data that we're collecting are standing up to changes in ecological conditions. We are not inflexible. And my real concern is that adding sites to the same staff that do the striped bass survey, we don't have that many people. So it is an extra human resource to do the work as it is described in this legislation. Mm-hmm. And if we go to this workshop and they say, you know what, we feel that you have some adjustments that you need to make, I don't know where we're going to find the human resources to do both things. I mean, what I would like to say is that we are flexible, we are interested in this problem, and we really want to walk through the scientific process to address the problem at hand.
So what's the situation in the central region? I mean, I'll stop, Madam Chair, but you're saying that, but then you can't answer what's happening in the central region with folks who are on the water who are saying that they believe that there's something happening there. And I just, so I really struggle to understand that.
But I'll just repeat it again. We have sampling that occurred in that central region.
That's not for the rockfish, is what you said.
It is not targeted at the rockfish, but it is the same basic methodologies. It's the same methodologies. It's just targeting a different set of species.
So is it capturing catfish?
Are they capturing catfish?
No, is that what they're counting? I'm just saying, we're trying.
They're looking
the
at,
rockfish really matters to us in
species
this
composition
state.
within those areas. They're looking at species composition. So it does provide a cross-check.
Right. Thank you.
Senator Augustine. Senator Hester.
Madam Chair, I had a question trying to answer on the previous bill.
That might be a problem since we've adjourned the hearing on that.
Okay.
That might have to be done offline.
Is there a good person at DNR to ask a question about the previous bill? I'll follow up. Never mind.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Are there any other questions for this witness on Senate Bill 87? Seeing none, that completes the hearing on this bill. And I think we are in the last of our suite of Senator Bailey bills. Senator, come on up. Senate Bill 100, lucky number 100, Natural Resources Pursuing Wounded Deer After Legal Hunting Hours, authorization. And Senator Bailey, I believe you are the only witness, so you may begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to say to the committee that we're halfway through. Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senator Bailey representing St. Mary's and Calvert County for the record. Senate Bill 100, we're going to switch from fishing to hunting, would authorize hunters who wound a deer during legal hunting hours to pursue, to track that deer, and then to be able to dispatch the deer humanely after the legal hunting hours have closed. Now, as many of you are aware, I have taught hunter safety for years. As a hunter safety instructor, we teach safety, we teach accuracy, we teach ethics, we teach how to be a legal hunter. We also teach how to make a clean, quick, humane kill. But there are things that happen in life, and if a deer is shot and that deer runs off, under the current law that has existed for years, the hunter only has until the end of the legal hunting hours to track and to kill that deer using a firearm or a bow. Deer that are wounded but are not able to be tracked until after the legal hunting hour changes, which for deer is a half an hour after sunset, they face one of two fates. Either the deer will die slowly of its injuries, or, as what's very apparent in my area in southern Maryland now, and I think most of Maryland, they will be attacked and eaten by predatory animals such as coyotes. I strongly believe in the right of Marylanders to hunt in our state, and I appreciate all of you helping us pass the hunting and fishing law in Maryland, but I also believe hunters have an ethical obligation to track the animals that they shot in the most humane manner as possible. Under existing law, a hunter who casts the rays of artificial light while possessing or having under control a firearm or other implement by which any deer could be killed faces a prison sentence of up to 6 months and a fine up to $2,000. And must have their hunting license revoked for at least 2 years. I do not believe that a hunter pursuing a wounded deer to humanely dispatch that deer should face these stringent penalties. Our law includes limitations on when hunting can occur for many good reasons. But I believe that this bill would help us to find a balance by granting hunters authorization in this limited and specific circumstance to be able to kill a deer that they wounded and to ensure that it is more humanely ending than any of the otherwise things of death that I have provided. This bill specifies that a deer can only be killed using the means authorized during that season to kill the deer. So if it was firearm season, they could use a firearm. If it's bow and arrow season, they could only use bow and arrow. This requires the Department of Natural Resource to adopt regulations to ensure that DNR has the flexibility in how this authorization is implemented and enforced. And I'd like to repeat that. I am not legislating how they do it. I simply am asking the Department of Natural Resources to come up with specific regulations. So, and if they see it so fit that a person calls in, and they call in, they give their GPS location, they give the address, they say that I'm tracking a deer. That way, that could be so that law enforcement would know that that person is not intentionally casting the rays of artificial light to shoot a gun in an an unsafe manner. I do know and appreciate this. I am submitting with this bill an amendment to make some clarifying changes, specifically to make it clear that a hunter is permitted to use a light to pursue a deer in accordance with this bill. I'm going to tell on myself just for a minute. 4 years, there are plenty. You talk to any natural resource police officer, and there are plenty of hunters that call them. And they say, hey, I'm tracking a deer and I can't find it. But it got dark. Can you help me? And we would go there and we would track the deer. Sure enough, you'd come up upon that injured animal. You would dispatch it, right? But I've got to say, and I don't know of any natural resource police officer that hasn't participated in that, and I've done it more times than I could ever count. The fact is, it was always a crime, right? There is no exception whatsoever. There is no ability around that. And that's what I am asking this committee, if you would please undertake this and to find a way that we can humanely track these animals and we can bring their life to a humane end, right? I would appreciate your help in that. And I respectfully request a favorable report, and I would stand for any questions.
Okay, any questions for Senator Bailey? We've got Senator Watson.
Thank you. Thank you for the bill. A couple questions, because I've always found it hard to put ethical and killing in the same sentence. Never made sense to me. But, if you did this bill, it seems like the reason there's a cutoff, everybody knows when the cutoff is, and if somebody goes and pursues a deer that's been wounded, you say ethically and all those good things, but the point of the matter is if you see it, you can shoot it again, right? Right?
So under current law?
No, with your bill. If you're tracking a deer after hours that's been injured, you can shoot them again, right?
So right now, yes. Right now, you're only allowed to. I guess the best thing would be you would track it without a firearm. If you find the deer, you would bludgeon it to death. This would give you the opportunity to humanely dispatch the deer.
To shoot it again?
Yes.
All right. So those people who know when hunting hours are over and then go back out into the woods and doing their thing, doesn't this put them in danger?
So when we are talking about legal hunting, and the fact is, as I'm sure you're familiar, to be a legal hunter, you need to have the permission of the property where you would be hunting.
Maybe.
No,
maybe, right? So that let me finish my sentence. Isn't there the current law dictates if it's during a certain season or period of time, you have to be a certain distance away from a home or other property, and you're allowed to do your thing with, as long as you take into account that distance?
So the laws are very, very clear, and I can help you with this. There is, depending on the weapon that you are using, there are different distances that you have to remain from an occupied dwelling. And there is no exception to enter the area of the safety zone with a firearm in the daytime, in the nighttime, whenever. There is absolutely no exception that you could do that. You can also, when you are tracking a deer, you can also not leave the property where you have permission to hunt. If the property, if you get to the creek that represents your property, even though you're tracking a deer, you do not have the legal right to trespass to track a deer.
When the hours have expired and deer hunting is officially over, could there potentially be people who live in the vicinity that will then go into the safety zone because there is no hunting at that time? And if they are, and we put this bill in place, does it put them at risk? Because now they don't know whether or not there's been a deer injured or not. They only know what has been articulated as the start and stop times for hunting. So my concern is, are the people. Can you respond to that?
Yes, Senator, I can, and I appreciate your question. And if they go in the safety zone of that residence, there is at no time, daytime, nighttime, whatever, any legal time that anyone with a firearm can enter that safety zone. Doesn't matter daytime, nighttime.
But your bill allows them to do that.
No, my bill absolutely does not infringe on the safety zones. It absolutely does not do anything like you are insinuating. That is not in my bill.
So if they have to stay out of a safety zone, and the safety zone is designated a certain number of yards, is my understanding, right?
Yes.
After that certain time period goes up, residents can come into the safety zone, even though the hunter cannot, but that closes that protective range. And my concern is, how do we ensure, through your bill, the way I read it, the way you articulated it, that after that time frame is passed, folks come into the safety zone and don't get inadvertently injured because somebody's tracking something, even though they're still in the safety zone. I mean, outside of the safety zone.
So I appreciate your concern. I'd be more than happy to talk to you in great detail about this offline, but this bill does not enter a situation where it provides an issue that makes things less safe. People can enter, they can leave their house on their property. There is no safety zone that a person that is not hunting has to stay away from a hunter, right? They can walk around and do whatever on their property 24/7.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Senator Hester.
I'm just curious, is there somebody from DNR who can answer questions?
Well, DNR is actually, no, I don't,
No,
they have submitted written testimony actually.
So I was looking at the
in
testimony.
favor of the bill, but okay.
I was just going to ask the senator, then, have you seen DNR's testimony, and are they in support of the bill?
So DNR it understands, I've had meetings with DNR about this. They understand that, as I pointed out, this has been something that has been occurring for years, right? This is an unwritten rule that everybody does it, right? We are just simply trying to bring this to the forefront and have DNR address it. And that is why this is not Senator Bailey saying these are the way that we're going to make sure it's safe. We want the implementation of the Department of Natural Resources. We want their rules and regulations. We want them to vet this process. We want them to be engaged. I just want to give the department the ability to do this, which under the current laws, they do not have that ability to do.
So what it says is that they envision creating a regulatory framework that would require the hunter to call the department's 24/7 communication center, report out their information, location, activity. That would create an informed and safe contact scenario for law enforcement who would be called to the scene. So, I mean, I am always a little nervous about when departments say they're going to do something in regulation, because they don't always do it exactly the way I would have done it. But in this case, it seems like that if you're going to be, if you have to dispatch a deer after dark, that this way there's a phone call that happens that isn't currently happening, correct?
That is not currently happening. That's
Right.
exactly right.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any additional questions for Senator Bailey? Okay. Seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 100. We're going to next move back to you, Senator Bailey, Senate Bill 186. And I've got two in-person witnesses signed up for your panel, Josh Buckler and Todd Ireland. Both signed up favorable, and that everything else is written.
We're going to.
Yeah.
This is going to be
Mr. Brown too.
Catfish.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, Senator Jack Bailey representing St. Mary's and Calvert County for the record. We're going to switch back, start talking about catfish. Senate Bill 186 would allow holders of commercial blue and flathead catfish finfish trot line licenses to catch these catfish south of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. As I know this committee is aware, invasive fish species pose a substantial threat to our state's ecosystem. We all just heard the Secretary of Natural Resources come to this committee and request a fee increase bill, and he based part of his justification on controlling the invasive species like the chana. I'd offer that catfish are even more challenging to our fishery and to the ecosystem from what I have seen. As part of our efforts to remove these non-native species from our waterways, 2 years ago, we passed legislation to reinstate the commercial blue and flathead catfish finfish trotline license, which had been allowed to sunset. However, under present regulations, they have been adopted by the department. These trot lines cannot be used in the Chesapeake Bay south of the Bay Bridge. The holders of these licenses, as well as the holders of tidal fish licenses, are a critical part of efforts to remove these harmful species of fish from our waterways. I do not believe that these current restrictions are consistent with the goal of getting as many of these fish out of the water as possible. It is important to note that this bill does not change anything else in the statute creating the license or any other part of state law. It does not relieve the license holder of their obligation to only catch blue and flathead catfish. This bill simply removes the restrictions on where the catfish can be caught. Since introducing this bill, I've heard from the commercial tidal fish license holders about the importance of ensuring that they are also covered by this bill, and I agree with them and support including them in any effort to open this part of the bay to trot lining for catfish. However, it's also my understanding that the Department of Natural Resources is discussing moving forward with a pilot program before opening this part of the bay to catfish trot lines in its entirety, which would affect the content of this legislation and the necessity of any amendments if the pilot were to move forward. I intend to continue discussing these issues with both the TFL holders and DNR to ensure that substantial action is taken towards a quick resolution
and we want that resolution as quickly as possible. I believe that we all share the same goal, even as we have had many different ideas on the best way to move forward. I thank you all for your consideration. I would appreciate a favorable report, and I would like to tell you that I did not submit the amendments because I have been working as of even up until the end of the day on Friday with DNR staff. They are working on a pilot, and the pilot they're working on can take a considerable number of people that we can be engaged in the fishery. But it's very important that these gentlemen that are catching these catfish are here to tell you this area and just how prolific the catfish are in this area, and how many thousands of pounds of catfish that these individuals catch. And the fact is, we brought this idea to the Department of Natural Resources last year, right? And to get a pilot, it's taken a whole year. And ladies and gentlemen, these catfish are more prolific than rabbits under the water, right? They are taking over the Chesapeake Bay. And when we have issues like this, we need them to respond, and that's why we have moved forward with legislation to sort of make sure that we're spurring DNR to get to where they need to be so we can control these catfish. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator. You've got the mic. You turn it over to whoever you want to talk next.
My name's Todd Ireland. I'm going to start by telling a story, sort of telling on myself like Senator Bailey did here when he was a cop. Last year about this time, I received several phone calls from friends who were catching big blue catfish anywhere from the St. Leonard area of Calvert County all the way up to Shadyside. I was told the fish were like 20 to 40 pounds. I'd been fishing in the river, had a lull in the action in the river. I decided to pull my gear and go to the bay. So when I went to the bay, I set my gear, and overnight I had 2,000 pounds of catfish. So I took my fish to the processor, got everything straight. I went to my bait guy, and he said, "Hey, Todd, be careful." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well," he said, "I think there's an old law in the book prohibiting you from doing what you're doing." I said, "Oh." So I called DNR. I have several law enforcement friends from being in a career. And I asked them, I said, "Look, is this illegal?" They said, "How are we supposed to know?" I said, "Well, if you don't know, how am I supposed to know?" So I said, "Would you look for me?" He said, "Yeah." About an hour later, I got a phone call back, and the officer said, "Get your gear out of the bay." And I said, "Okay." And that's exactly what I did. Moving forward from there, again, that was over a year and a day ago, so I should be good, right? So moving forward from there, I'm the small guy in the Patuxent River, and last year I caught about 30,000 pounds out of the Patuxent River. I'm unable to be there all the time. I have other obligations still in my life, but like I said, I'm the little guy. You can talk to Josh in a minute. He's the man that's out there doing it every day. The blue catfish, folks, they're an eating machine. They're going to eat everything. And I'll tell you, the ones that I had in the bay, the only thing I could figure they were eating was horseshoe crabs, because the only other sea creature I saw that day was horseshoe crabs, and there was plenty of them. So that, to me, I think is why those fish were in there feeding that day. I wish I'd have cut one open so I could say, yes, that is what they were eating, so that you guys would know for the purposes of this bill. Chesapeake Biological Lab celebrated their centennial last week, and I was able to talk to a fish biologist there. And I asked him about the blue catfish. He said they're mostly just in the river above the Benedict Bridge. And I spoke to him in length and showed him pictures, and he was in shock when I showed him the pictures of how many catfish and the size of the catfish that were in that part of the bay at that time. We continued on. We went into rockfish, but I know I don't have time to discuss that here with you, but it was a young of the year issue, which I was glad to see covered here today. Please consider opening in this area of the bay. Fish have tails, they're going to move. They don't have a calendar, so we need to do everything we can to try to move these fish from that part of the bay. Thank you.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, I'm Joshua Buckler. I usually just fish the Patuxent River, me and my wife, and we've seen the numbers of these catfish go through the roof. Yes, since September of last year up to January this year, I think we've harvested roughly 70,000 pounds. Numbers have been down for us because the river's been froze. We're only fishing half the gear. But we've seen everything from oysters to soft shell clams to crawfish to countless fish species. We've seen you wouldn't believe the things that I've showed him that we've pulled out of these fish. I want to go after these numbers that Todd's or that he's seen last year. That's why we want to get out into the bay this year. It's restricted to us right now, but that's why I would like to get this passed so we could get out into the deeper waters of the bay. Because there's a large area that we can't get to, that we can't touch right now, that I would love us to be able to get into. I mean, I can sit here and talk to you till I'm blue in the face about things I see every day on the water, but you'll never believe half of it. Not with these fish anyway.
Okay,
So, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brown?
Yes, Robert T. Brown, President of the Maryland Waterman Association. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and its members. I'd like a favorable on Senate Bill 186. This is the biggest predator that we have in the Chesapeake Bay now. It started down in Virginia, was put in by Inland Waterways into a lake down there, and they said, don't worry, they'll never get into the rivers. Well, a flood came along and washed the dam out. Then they had them down in the James and the Rappahannock River. Then they moved into the Potomac River, which is very heavily concentrated. They're in every river, every creek in the Chesapeake Bay in both states. And all they do is eat and have more baby catfish. And the volume of the fish is unreal. And what they're feeding on, all these crabs we have, they're affecting our crab industry. They were like white perch. They'll eat yellow perch. They'll eat soft-shelled clams. Even these rangers, these hard-shell clams, with their jaws, they can just crush them and eat them. And everything that's out there. As a matter of fact, you know, you think if you're going catfishing, you got a bottom fish for them. I'm out there, my pound net on sheep's head, and it drops right off down to 30 foot of water. And I tell the fellows, I said, man, I'm catching some rockfish out there. I said, they moved down river, come on out. I see this fellow's rod goes down, comes back. He catches a 12-pound catfish out there. So they're all over the place. And the amount of destruction that they're doing to our other industries and our rockfish. I talked to Nick Hargrove with Tillman Seafood just this morning. I said, somebody told me that during the spring of the year that these catfish, when you clean them, you get the eggs come out on the floor and stuff. He says, it's the worst mess you ever seen. I have to hire somebody to come around and sweep the fish eggs up. Now, he said, and they got some grass with them. Well, when a fish spawns, after that spawn floats around there for a day or so, it will attach to a piece of grass, a piece of stick. I've even seen it stick onto nets. And then when they go ahead and they're eating the grass, they're eating the fish, it's the eggs and stuff, it is killing our industry as we know it. Now, it's true. There are people making money out of it now. We are not holding our own with these fish. As a matter of fact, in the Potomac River, if you give me a second more, in 2003, they made the commercial harvest. Flathead catch, you report, blue catch, and channel catch. Well, back in 2003, it was 23,000 pounds that was harvested in the Potomac, just a commercial in the main stem. Last year, it was 3,189,000 pounds harvested. That's the problem we have. We need this open. Thank you very much.
Okay, Senator Hester.
Thank you. I was just reading once again the testimony from DNR and was curious when the Invasive Catfish Advisory Committee recommended removing or allowing sorry, I lost the page now. The nets or whatever.
The finfish lines?
Yes, the finfish lines. Thank you. Like, how long has that been a recommendation? And they're moving forward with a pilot that's supposed to open in February.
Sir, you got to put it, because we're streaming, you got to put the mic there.
So if I may, I think what happened here is nobody expected the catfish to be in this portion of the bay. Nobody expected it. And now they are, and now the laws are behind trying to play catch up because these fish have moved into that territory. It's an invasive species. We want them out of there at all costs. I think there was worried about a bycatch there. I can tell you, I was only there for one day, but there was absolutely no bycatch whatsoever. The only closest thing, again, like I said, I saw that day was horseshoe crabs, and there was plenty of them. And I think that's what they were feeding on.
So if this advisory committee has recommended that this practice, and why is the department haven't they yet rolled out this pilot? Like, there seems like there's a big, long gap in there, right?
I don't know. I actually, as soon as this happened to me last year, I went right to Senator Bailey. I reached out to fisheries. I reached out to everybody I could, said, look, this law needs to be changed. Nobody has expected these fish to be here. And I think that's why that law has not been changed, has not been put into place, because nobody expected them there.
Because it seems like that, I mean, like, obviously, you want to do a pilot to protect, to make sure everything's like copacetic, but there's also a cost to inaction. Like, if the pilot takes a long time and we don't do anything, then the catfish multiply and everything gets worse also. So, like, by not doing anything, we are doing something.
It's already been a year. I'm on the evasive advisory board for that, and we recommended that. We started it back in November, then it ended up the end of January before we.
Of which year?
What's that?
Of which year?
Last year in November, we started working on it, getting a pilot program together. And then we moved it ahead, and in January, we approved to go ahead with it. It hasn't been drawn up yet. It's still a work in progress.
January of 25 or January of 24?
January 25 this year.
Okay,
It
so then it
just
hasn't
was
been that
approved,
long.
so it hasn't been had. We need this bill now, is what we need. We don't need to wait any longer.
So Senator, we addressed this in January of 24 with the Department of Natural Resources. And we said everything we could do to try to do an emergency action. That was our intention, try to do something to move forward last year. And now we're a year later, and we still don't have the tools that we need to control these fish. We're getting ready to move into a spawning season. That is why this bill is before you now, right? If DNR is moving forward, then that's great, but we want to make sure they're moving forward. And that's the ask of this committee, right? Is however you see fit to have DNR move forward, we want to move forward as expeditious as we can to control the invasive blue catfish.
Okay, Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, looking at the Talbot Watermen's Association, their testimony, and I think what jumped out at me, and it goes to your last point, Senator Bailey, these catfish can live more than 20 years and grow to over 100 pounds. So we now are just in the process of either trying to get a pilot started or moving forward with this legislation to, allow us to have this tool to catch these catfish. My question is, given what you've been experiencing, that we didn't expect them here, now they're here, given how long they live and how big they grow, that with the sense of urgency, how long do we think it's going to take for us to really catch up and get a handle on this? I'm really trying to drive the sense of urgency on this. Like this, even with this approval, how long is this going to take?
I don't know that you ever will. All you're going to do is minimize the impacts at this point. I mean, and the longer it goes, the worse it's going to be.
So this is an emergency situation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I'm not asking for anything that can't be done in any tributaries of the Chesapeake Bay or north of the Bay Bridge, except for the Tangier Sound and Pocomoke Sound. So all I'm asking is for that area south of the Bay Bridge, which that fish doesn't have a geofence on him. He doesn't know he can't come below that bridge, or he doesn't know he can't come out of the river in that area of the bay. So that's what we're asking for, just to open up that section of the bay and let us catch these fish and get them out of there.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions for the panel, Senator? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 186. Thank you to the entire panel. Senator Bailey, that brings us to the sixth and final bill of the day from you, Senator Bailey, Senate Bill 335. And I've got William Miles, Jared Thompson here, and then we do have one virtual witness signed up unfavorable, but those are the two witnesses at least I have on my list. Unless you've got some others. So is Mr. Miles here, Mr. Thompson? Okay. Okay, Senator Bailey, Senate Bill 335.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Senator Jack Bailey, representing St. Mary's and Calvert County for the record. Senate Bill 335 would require the bag limit for all Canada geese to be uniform across the state during the migratory Atlantic population Canada goose hunting season.
there are currently 2 different goose hunting zones in Maryland. One for the Atlantic population, geese who migrate and leave the contiguous 48 states. And one for resident population geese who live in the contiguous 48 states all year, including the migrant geese we have in Maryland that migrate to upstate New York but do not enter Canada. The state is divided into these different zones based on type of geese that are generally found in that area. The Atlantic population hunt zone, right? Traditionally the Eastern Shore. That is traditionally where you see the migrant geese. And the resident population hunt zone, areas west of the Chesapeake Bay. The season for hunting resident population is managed by the state and is over 70 days with a bag limit of 5 birds a day. The season for hunting Atlantic population is managed by the state and the Fish and Wildlife Service, and it's considerably more restricted. As the season this year is 30 days with a bag limit of 2. Next year, it's going to be 30 days with a bag limit of 1. And that's the whole reason that I bring you this bill. Those of you that have driven down to Charles County and you have driven down 301, if you are on the left side of 301, the southern side of 301, the eastern side of 301, that is the Atlantic population boundary. The north side or the west side of 301 is the resident population. But if you happen to cross over into Virginia, as you drive over the Harry Nice or the Mac Middleton Bridge, as you drive over that bridge, as far as you can see left or right is all Atlantic population. Right? So the fact is there is a big disparity that exists, and the fact is based on speaking, and you can see the testimony, based on many hunters and people that are very worried about this, right? The fact that if the geese are on one side of the 301, they can shoot 5. And if they're on the other side of 301, they can only shoot 1 or 2 based on the season. I am not trying to tell DNR that they can't manage the resident population, because I completely understand the fact that we need to manage and, in my opinion, eradicate the resident geese because they have a negative impact on the AP flyway, but to make a standard that when, in fact, the Atlantic population is in place, we keep that bag limit the same, so that it is the same everywhere for that 30 days. After that 30 days and the Atlantic population is closed, right, then they can shoot as many as they want in the resident season. But my fear is when we see the population declining, and we see that last year we had a 45-day 2-bird season for the entire Eastern Shore, for all of Southern Maryland. We saw how much revenue that brought to our state, right? We have all lived through a moratorium for Canada geese, and we saw what a negative impact that had on our state, the goose hunting capital of the United States. I mean, those of you that have been to Easton for the Waterfowl Festival, you have seen this. The fact is, if any Atlantic population geese are shot in Southern Maryland during the resident season, right, that is wrong. We should be protecting the AP geese, and the fact that during the time period we shoot them on the southern side of the limits and the standards. We shoot them on the southern side of 301. They fly across because they've been shot at, and all of a sudden the hunters over there get to take 5 a person out of that flock of AP. My issue is it should be the same for everybody across the state. This bill simply does our part in protecting a resource that was under a moratorium in this state. And with the fact that we're going to 30 days with one bird next year, there are many hunters that are fearing a moratorium in the future. The science, when we talk about this, is clear. When I was in the 70s and we were hunting, we had a 90-day 3-bird limit. And we simply killed too many, and it led to a moratorium. Senate Bill 335 will only affect the bag limits in the Atlantic Flyway residential population hunt zone during the 30-day Atlantic population season. As soon as the Atlantic population season is over, hunters in the resident hunting zone will be able to return to their higher limit. And any AP geese that are over there, they can fly down to where they're supposed to be, and they won't be being shot. By protecting these migratory geese from overharvest, we will ensure that a moratorium will not be issued on hunting geese in Maryland, as the Atlantic population geese are what sets the standard for the whole population. The bill allows the late resident season and the United States Department of Agriculture permits for nuisance resident geese are not affected. We did not want to affect the farming community and how they have issues with resident geese. If resident geese are such a problem, we should be hunting them in the spring and the summer. We should eliminate the problem without negatively impacting our Atlantic population, goose population, and because we are attempting to conserve them. I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 335. I thank you for your consideration.
Okay, Mr. Miles, you want to go next?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Bill Miles on behalf of the Hunters of Maryland here in support of the bill. Senator Bailey went through a lot of information for you all. I'll just try to capsulize it just a bit. We commend the senator because it's a conservation issue. This is purely 100%, look at this bill as a conservation issue. There are 3 seasons right now for resident birds. You've got a 2-week period in September, 8 birds. You have a week season in November, resident birds, 5 birds. Then you can go from December 16th to March 10th this year and kill 5 birds a day as compared to what the good senator said for the migratory birds called Atlantic population. It's 30 days and 1 bird. And the concern is about maybe next year having to reduce the rate is because the biologists, the Canadian biologists, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife biologists go to the Ungava Peninsula. It's about a 97,000 square acre piece of land way up in northern Quebec, and that's where all our birds come from. Well, they look at breeding pairs and they look at population. And even though we have 2 birds this year with 1. It's only 1 bird next year because the breeding pairs are down, the population's down. Those numbers are all quoted in our testimony. I could give those to you if I want, but they're there. And so that's what's driving this. So if you're out there killing 5 birds, September's fine, March is fine. Those migratory birds are gone. They come here like sometimes mid-October. They're coming later every year. When I was growing up, it was like 1st of October. But they're here from October till about February, and they breed here. These geese breed here. And as the senator said, we are the capital, the goose hunting capital of the world. And there is great economics associated with legal goose hunting. But if we allow these 5 and 8 birds to be killed as residents during the same season that overlaps with migratory, what does common sense tell you? You're killing migratory birds. All this bill says is whatever the migratory season is, be it 30 days, 1 bird, 30 days, 2 bird, during that 1 window, those resident bird people can, those resident goose shooters can only take the amount that the migratory bird limit is. It's conservation 100%, and it's imperative that this bill be looked at seriously.
Okay, thank you, sir. Questions for the senator or witness? Okay, Okay, seeing none, our virtual witness is not in the queue, and so that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 335. We're going to next go to a Troika 3 Simon Air bills, starting with Senate Bill. Thank you, Senator Bailey.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senate Bill 103. And Senator, you are the only witness on this bill, Senate Bill 103.
Thank you. I thought I had a lot of bills today until I saw Bailey. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for the record, Senator Simon Air on Senate Bill 103. This is a very simple bill. I want to thank the Department of Natural Resources for their support letter. In fact, this request came from the department. So all it does is it provides additional reporting information if you have a boating accident. Specifically, it asks for damage to navigational aid markers, lights, and identifiers. It's a matter of safety to get those repaired. It also is required to go to the U.S. Coast Guard. There's no opposition. I ask for your favorable consideration.
Okay, any questions for Senator Simon Air on Senate Bill 103? Seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 103. We're going to next move to Senate Bill 282, and we do have two witnesses signed up, one favorable with amendment. But why don't you give your testimony, then I'll call the two other witnesses up after you, okay? Unless you want them up there with you. I see Deb Ray, favorable, and Lynn Nash also favorable with an amendment, so I'm not quite. Is Ms. Nash here? Yes. Okay, so why don't you both come up? You're the two witnesses on the bill. So Senator Simon Air, Senate Bill 282.
Thank you. Since you already said it, I won't repeat it. I want to thank the advocates. If you look at your testimony, you'll see a lot of written support for this as well. About a week and a half ago, I gave a presentation on Senate Bill 275, which laid out the overall structure, definitions with a PowerPoint. So I'm not going to reiterate that. You have that in your memory banks. But it completely restructures Maryland law and establishes consistent and equal benefits for all of our 8 branches. And so this is one of the supporting bills that deals with the natural resources article. And it basically updates certain sections that we provide for our armed forces. We also provide for PHS and NOAA. The areas that deals with is the healing and hunting fishing program, exempting annual fishing license for nonprofits who help our veterans, fishing renewals while they're deployed, and then also licenses when they come back on leave. Additionally, we are codifying the state park pass for our veterans and also active service members. There is a clarifying amendment that it also applies to our Maryland National Guard. And with that, I will open it up for questions, ask for favorable consideration.
Okay, thank you. Former Delegate Ray in the House here. It's all yours. You're going to be on the clock, okay? 2.5 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, and members. I'm Deb Ray from St. Mary's County, and I'm representing the Joint Veterans Committee of Maryland. And I'd like to ask my fellow veterans who are here today who support this bill to stand. There was a few more here earlier. I think you saw them. We are in support of Senator Simon Air's effort to standardize the definitions of the word veteran and other military terms throughout the law. We also appreciate his efforts to codify the practice of allowing veterans free daily access to state parks, and we request a favorable vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Nash.
So for the record, Captain Lynn Nash, I'm the Commissioned Officers Association of the United States Public Health Service. I'm a public health officer, and I have, over the years, witnessed firsthand members of our Corps be denied access to benefit, primarily because of the language in the bill, or sometimes the fact that it was omitted from a bill. I've worked relentlessly. Last session, Family Serve Act, NOAA and Public Health were not in. We asked that it be amended. We were successful and we got it through. This session, burial equity rights. Again, we're clarifying what is already the practice, but we want NOAA and public health recognized as who we are. You understand why this is important, but The amendment, sir, is General Provisions 117, and that is the specific piece of Maryland statute that says that NOAA and public health are veterans, and it's been in place since Governor O'Malley. Why is this important? Both NOAA and public health have our headquarters in Maryland. Our officers work in NIH, Food and Drug, SAMHSA, HRSA, CMS. There are 1,398 officers, 8 ready reservists, and about 7,000 retirees here in this state. So I served in the Army. I'm a combat veteran. I also served in public health, and guess what? I did the war on public health. Ebola, Fukushima. I was the officer in charge on the Hill during anthrax, Katrina, Rita, pandemic. We work hard. Right now, NOAA is down on the Potomac. NOAA was up on the Key Bridge. We deserve to have the same rights as everyone else. I ask for a favorable report with the amendment that 117 stay in place. Thank you.
That concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 282. Which is going to bring us to final Simon Air bill of the day, Senate Bill 73. Got a powerhouse heavyweight list of panelists. You've got Senator Michael Jackson signed up. Is Jake Weissman still here? I see our friend Jake Weissman. Come on up, Jake. Casey Wetzel, Jennifer Carr-Pilholsky, and then finally Melanie Miller, another familiar face and name. And that is I think that fills up the table. 5 seats, 5 witnesses, all signed up favorable. Senator Simon Air, you've got your A-list panel, so present the bill, Senate Bill 73.
Thank you. And for the record, Senator Brian Simon Air, Senate Bill 73. I'm presenting this very bipartisan legislation, as you'll look by the co-sponsors. It's a true testament to Mike Miller that you see both Democrats and Republicans supporting this bill. This is consensus legislation we have worked on for months with the Chesapeake Bay Trust, the Department of Natural Resources, legislators, and of course, we shared with the Miller family. This bill does 2 things. One, it names the Chesapeake Conservation Corps program after Thomas V. Mike Miller, Jr., and it also adds the word climate to the program's title. When discussing the new title, we considered its length. We agreed that this is appropriate for the formal title, but when necessary for space consideration, operationally they can use a shortened title. This is common practice even in existing law, as we have seen shorter titles being referenced by shortened titles. Additionally, when we looked at other naming programs and funds in statute, we found longer titles, such as the Douglas J.J. Peters Veterans of the Afghanistan and Iraq Conflicts Scholarship Fund, and it has worked well while providing honor to those individuals. This bill is about honoring a fellow member of the General Assembly who gave far more to it than he ever wanted in return. Former Senate President Mike Miller served both in the House of Delegates and the Senate, where he became the longest-serving state Senate president in America. His accomplishment would take too long to detail, but I want to share a little of my personal interaction with him. I served with Mike for 13 years, and he was the Senate president when I came into office. I was greener than green in the ways of politics, and probably a thorn in his side for the first few years, considering my initial mentors. However, over time, I watched him and learned, and he gained my respect as I matured in the Senate. Even if we disagreed on issues at times, we became friends in the political arena to a point where I could ask his advice and he'd freely give it. Early on, as a gesture of goodwill, I started sending him those nice little Christmas gift boxes with cheese and nuts and candies and cakes to his house. A couple years later, he teased me saying, "I just want you to know that I always had my wife test them first to make sure you didn't poison them." He was a character. I quickly learned that Mike had a passion for his family, the General Assembly, and making sure we left the world a better place than when we found it. Mike taught me what it meant to be a senator, being respectful of each other, honoring the institution, work for the betterment of the people, and to always learn from history as it tends to repeat itself. He would often say, "I know my history. I can tell you what's going to happen in this situation before it happens." He was right more often than not. One of his many initiatives he championed 15 years ago was the Chesapeake Conservation Corps program. There have been additions and tweaks to the program, but by and large, it is still the same program he created. Most recently, its duties and fundings were updated in the Climate Solutions Now Act. So one of the changes of this bill is to better reflect the program's purpose by adding the word climate in the title. The other change, of course, is to add Thomas V. Mike Miller Jr. to the title, as it depicted his love for the environment and education. Back in 2020, we rightly honored former Speaker Bush by creating the Michael Aaron Bush Sports Fund in Maryland law. This bill works to honor Mike Miller in our statutes as well. I ask for favorable consideration.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Melanie, why don't you go next? Seems appropriate.
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much. This is the first time I've been in this building since 2020, so it's a 5-year in the Miller Building, and it's a privilege to be in front of you today. And, you know, Chair, Vice Chair, Chair Feldman, and Senator Kagan, I feel like you're brothers and sisters to me. I grew up with you all. And so thank you for the opportunity to testify. You know, my name is Melanie Miller, and I'm honored to speak in support of renaming the Chesapeake Conservation Corps in memory of my father. You see Senate President Emeritus Thomas V. Mike Miller, and I testify on behalf of my mother, my 4 siblings, and amazing 16 grandchildren, all of whom are deeply proud and grateful for the recognition of his legacy. I also want to extend my heartfelt thanks to Semina Simonere from my county of Anne Arundel County. So my niece Riley, as you open your bill folder, my niece Riley is a former Conservation Corps member and has submitted written testimony sharing her experience and the lasting relationships and friendships she made during her incredible service year. She's put her on a trajectory for really success in business, incredible, because of this Conservation Corps. It's a great testimony to the organization. So you see, my father dedicated 50 years to public service. So as I said, we grew up with the Senate, and so proudly, and 33 years as Maryland Senate President. You know, while his leadership shaped Maryland in countless ways, 2 of his greatest passions were his history in the Chesapeake Bay and education. To him, the Bay was more than just a landmark. It was history. It was a treasure that must be protected for future generations like your children, your grandchildren. He often called it the jewel of our region and cherished nothing more than sitting on our back deck, watching that sunset over the water he loved so much. You know, many of you all have been to that house. In the last months of his life, it was during COVID, and it was those simple things that I'm sure your families cherish the most. Well, for our family, it was that bay. You know, I just remember that we would just sit together on that back deck, dreaming, reminiscing, and telling stories. Gosh, those history lessons. We have some of them recorded. And without fail, hearing him proclaim, and you all could remember his voice, and he says, "Have you seen a more beautiful view?" I mean, just to see his face shine, and it was his peaceful time. And it was so beautiful, as I'm sure you all have that place in your house as well. You know, and the Bay was woven, as I mentioned, into the family's life. Alongside my mother, Patricia, he built that large, loving family home on the Bay. And the Bay was a heart of all those memories, after he also took many of us on those shark teeth hunting expeditions. Incredible. I would tell you all to come visit the house and go on one of these expeditions. It's amazing. And so all the family members, but the most important thing about those shark's teeth expeditions, finding the shark's teeth, holding in your hand, and he'd say, "Oh, that's a megalodon." He would tell you the history of every little piece he found. So it was history lessons that he taught these grandchildren and ourselves on this Bay. And so I say to you, as well as beyond his dedication to the Bay, my father, as you know, was a teacher, as you mentioned, the teacher of history. He believed in mentorship and service and the power of knowledge. You know, as I always tell people, his motto, you all know the motto, each one reach one, each one teach one. And that's what's so important, because he reflected his lifelong belief that it's our duty to educate, inspire, and uplift that next generation. So, you know, as I mentioned, his resignation speech, it happened in December of 2020. And on the, you know, he reflected on his time in the Senate, and he mentioned two proud things. He said he brought hard work and love of the Bay and love of education. Those are the three things. You know, he didn't last much longer than that. He died 2 weeks later. But those are the words we need to know. Hard work, love of the Bay, and love of education. It brings just what this Chesapeake Conservation Corps does. And that's what is so fitting when Senator Simonier calls our family and tells us of this honor. So we say, you know, this program was designed to educate, engage, and inspire young adults in conservation. But you know what? My father would be always first to acknowledge that he did not do this alone. He was blessed with the best chiefs of staff throughout his career. One right here, Jake Wiseman. Then his senators as well were co-sponsors for this Conservation Corps when it was first announced. So what I was saying is Vicki Grubel, we need to recognize, and he would be more fitting to recognize that Miss Vicki Grubel was his chief of staff during this time. And during those stories, as we walked on the Bay, he told the story of his chief of staff, Miss Vicki Gruber, would come to him and told him about this idea. So he always took the chiefs of staff's ideas, and he said, wow, that's brilliant. He would tell them all, you're brilliant. Maybe not been the best idea, but he would tell you they're brilliant. But this was the best idea. So Vicki's vision and her expertise helped structure this program and secure, guess what, guys, Republicans, Democrats, a secure funding source. Amazing. A Bay tag, right? It paid for by the Bay tag. That's what Dad was so proud of, a secured funding source for brilliance to pay for education of the Chesapeake Bay. So that's what we said, these iconic Maryland license tags. I hope y'all have one. It's beautiful. It tells that story of Maryland, like he told the story, featuring the blue crab and the heron. And more than just a symbol of our state, again, it directly funds this environmental education program. You know, and again, he always credited his many senators he worked along, and many of you all had co-sponsored many of this Chesapeake legislations through the years. So guess what? We're coming to the end. In late 2024, as Senator Simonier said, he reached out to our family with the idea of renaming the program to my father's honor, the Thomas V. Mike Miller Chesapeake Conservation and Climate Corps program. It will not only carry forward his name, but also his deep commitment to the Bay and the young people who become future stewards of the Bay. Could be your kids. Come on, sign them up. On behalf of my family, I ask for your support and honor of my family's legacy, favorable for this bill. Let us continue his mission. Guess what? It's about each one reach one, each one teach one, and ensure that his passion for the Bay and for educating young leaders lives on in the generations to come. Thank you.
Okay. Why don't we go to the senator from the current senator from District 27, Senator Jackson, next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Vice Chair and members of the EEE Committee, I'm honored to sit here today to support this piece of legislation to rename the Chesapeake Conservation Corps program to include the name of our Senate President, Thomas V. Mike Miller. I won't go on as long as Melanie. She has a little bit more stories to tell than me. But what I will say is this. My getting to know Senator Miller occurred back in Prince George's County. When I started out as the FOP president, I would have conversations with him as we were trying to get legislation passed, walking the halls of Annapolis during the 90s. And then when I was elected sheriff, we had a terrific relationship because he would always remind me he held the power here in Annapolis, and that's where the authority of the sheriff came from. So he would always remind me of that when he would have one of his troopers to call me up and say, the president needs to see you. And I'd have to drop things and meet him at an undisclosed location. They would only tell me once I got in my car. But I think one of the most memorable things that I've always had with him was he'd always say, you know, I'm not clairvoyant or anything, but I see things before they happen. I'm a student of history, and I think anyone who's ever met him can tell you that. But the most thing that resonates with me is that he spoke in riddles. It drove me crazy. He would never speak straight to me, or I don't think anybody, but he would always speak in riddles, and I'm still trying to solve some of those to this day. I was honored in 2012 while working with Governor O'Malley to have him intercept my exiting the building of the State House with a meeting with the governor and asking me had I thought about getting back into the political arena. Obviously, I said no, but I now understand how fish get caught. You know, you're just minding your own business, and somebody reels you in. One of the greatest opportunities ever. He would always say to me, always remember that what I'm asking you to do is not just in Prince George's where you're born and raised and you've served as sheriff there. I need you to go into Calvert County where his new home was. And I need you to understand how vital that is to ensure that what he believes I brought to the table was necessary to adhere to his principles of service, to always be honored, to always be of service, and to ensure that you listen to your constituency. And he would gently remind me when he gave me the nod to succeed him as the senator that I was then picking up 3 counties. And he would say to me, you have 3 diverse, distinct, and oftentimes contrasting counties. But remember to always be honored to be of service, and you will be okay. So look, this is a terrific opportunity for us to just share our love and dedication and reverence to a person who dedicated his life to service to the state of Maryland. Not only was he the longest serving Senate president in the history of this country, I believe he may be, if somebody can correct me if they like, but I think may have been the longest serving senator in Maryland. 51 years, I believe it was. I'm not sure. No?
I don't think that one's right. Jake's.
Oh well, he'll take care of that. But anyway, but what I will say is that he dedicated his life to service, and I am the senator of the District 27 because of him, and I'm honored every day to sit in this seat. So glad to be a part of this dedication bill, and I ask for a favorable report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, we're going to go to Jake, because one of the more interesting jobs anybody's probably ever had here is being Chief of Staff to the Senate President Mike Miller. So, Jake, why don't you go next?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jake Weissman. I'm here testifying in my personal capacity and at the request of a variety of members of the Miller family and alumni network. Just for the record, President Miller was close, but Senator Norman Stone served in the Senate from 1967 to 2018 as the longest serving senator. So there's your trivia fact of the day. As Melanie briefly mentioned, I had the honor of the 12 years I worked in the Senate. For 10 of them, I worked for Senator Miller in a variety of capacities, including as Special Assistant Deputy Chief of Staff, and then a variety of epithets that aren't appropriate for a committee room. In my time working for him, the first session I worked for him was when he and Ms. Gruber and the Senate and the House created the Chesapeake Conservation Corps in 2010, and then I had the privilege as a staffer of staffing him at probably half a dozen Chesapeake Conservation Corps events over the years. He loved the program. I think he found it to be the perfect intersection of education and environment, which he appreciated, and it was always a program I knew that would throw us off our schedule because he would talk to anybody and everybody who approached him, which for those of you who have been a political staffer, you know it's the most wonderful thing for pictures and the most aggravating things to actually keep him getting to the next event. I was talking to Patty Miller, Melanie's mom, President Miller's widow, on the drive down here today, and we were discussing about how Mike hated the prospect of things being named after him. I've seen him. I know, given this building and the story behind that is fascinating in its own right. I've seen him yell at people in his office when they brought up the idea of naming things after him. But I think he would have appreciated this. He really loved and cherished this program, and I think while he would have scowled and maybe cursed up a storm at the idea, he would have appreciated this honor that this committee is considering. I appreciate the time and hope you vote favorable on Senate Bill 73. Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't you go next, and then we'll pick up our last witness. Tell us who you are.
Hi, my name is Casey Wetzel. I'm the Vice President of Programs with the Chesapeake Bay Trust. Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee, thank you for your time. You have my written testimony, which outlines a really full history of the Corps, but you've heard a lot already today. A little background just on the Chesapeake Bay Trust. We were also created by the General Assembly in 1985 as a 501c3 to empower communities on the ground to be part of the recovery of our local natural resources. The Chesapeake Conservation Corps, which we've established, was established in 2010 and now is administered by the Trust, places young people ages 18 to 25 in year-long stipend-supported terms of service at not-for-profit host sites. Corps members work on a project to advance their host organization's missions in the realms of watershed restoration, energy conservation, forestry, climate change, agriculture, and K-12 education. And this work expands not only their minds, but the host organization's capacities as well. They receive life and career skills training, and they learn to lead their own independent projects as part of their experience. For the past 15 years, the Corps has played a critical role in increasing access to green careers and developing the next generation of environmental stewards. Since its inception, the program has received nearly 1,600 applications from young adults eager to make a difference. Currently, the 15th class of the Corps includes over 50 members, underscoring the continued demand for the program. The program now has 428 alumni, with 70% of alumni securing full-time green jobs immediately following their service year. And 30% of those graduates are hired by their host sites directly into new jobs that are being established to keep them. Senate Bill 528, the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022, which was already noted, further expanded the Corps program by increasing the focus on climate-related projects and directed those projects to take place within communities disproportionately affected by climate impacts. Renaming the Corps will honor the legacy of Senate President Mike Miller and will also bring greater visibility to the program's work, helping to inspire future generations of young people to pursue careers in conservation, climate change, and sustainability. We're proud of the Corps and grateful to Senator Simon Ayer and to Senator Ferguson, Senator Jackson for putting forward this legislation, and obviously to Senate President Mike Miller for establishing the program, and for the committee's consideration today. Thank you all for your time.
Okay, let's go to our final witness on the panel.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Carr, and I'm here to submit testimony in support of Senate Bill 73. In 2010, I had the privilege of joining the very first cohort of the Chesapeake Conservation Corps. I graduated back in December 2007, which is right when the Great Recession began, and facing very limited job market, most of which wanted to see experience already in hand. The possibility of finding a job in the field of conservation seemed near impossible. And then in 2010, I came across a posting for the Chesapeake Conservation Corps, and it was a program that was willing to give recent college graduates that actual first-time real-world experience. I quickly applied and, of course, was thrilled when I got the call that I had been placed. Throughout this program, I had the opportunity to learn about bay conservation and restoration through hands-on work. Over the past 15 years, I've gone from an intern to serving as the Director of Restoration, where I'm able to continue working with the Chesapeake Bay Trust to implement millions of dollars of restoration throughout our watersheds. During this time, I've been able to see other Year 1 members go on to become project implementation officers with DNR and even a vice president of one of our partnering organizations. Over the past 15 years, I have seen what an incredible impact this program can have on expanding the capacity of small watershed organizations like ours. Our Corps members have led unique research projects to help us better understand our waterways. They've scuba dived oyster reefs, and they've worked with local partners to install small-scale restoration projects. Once completing the program, our Corps members have gone on to obtain master's degrees, participate in the Peace Corps, and even get water resource engineering degrees. And we haven't just benefited from hosting Corps members, our current riverkeeper who recently brought submerged aquatic vegetation restoration to the Western Shore, and our outreach coordinator who last summer led summer camps reaching well over 1,000 youth, also started their careers as Corps members with other partnering organizations. Thank you so much for your time today.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Anybody, any other comments? I feel bad Senator Hester's not here. You know, she was seatmate Senate President for a period of time there. So, okay, any questions, comments, Senator Carrozza? And then we're going to try to finish up here relatively
Thank
quickly.
you, Mr. Chair. And Melanie, that was just tremendous, heartfelt testimony. And I couldn't help to bring up that President Miller also had a real passion and deep love for Maryland's coast and Maryland's coastal bays. And I would think he would be smiling down that we ended up having, the plate is now a bays plate that says protect the Chesapeake and coastal bays. So I think that, I'm thinking he would have liked that given just his passion for Maryland's coast as well.
Okay, anything else? We've got the President Pro Tem, Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the sponsor of the bill. Can I ask you why you didn't ask for me to be a co-sponsor of this bill?
This was pre-filed, and it was hard to start trying to get all 47 on it. So we got the Senate President, and then we got the person from the district. And the plan is to open it up for everybody to co-sponsor.
Thank you, Senator.
I think we can take care of that during the voting session. I have a feeling. Okay, well, that's going to conclude the bill hearing on Senate Bill 73. Thanks to everybody for coming in today. Senator Jackson, why don't you just take a seat? We have one witness bill, and then we're going to come back and take your bill next. So we're going to get Senator Salling up here for, he's just got one witness.
Yes, sir.
And then we'll bring you back up for the final bill of the day. So with that, we've got Senate Bill 301, Senator Salling, and I've got on my list, just one witness, Pete McCardle. Mr. McCardle.
Yes, sir.
Again, Senate Bill 301. And so, Senator, why don't you proceed? And then, Mr. McCardle, you're going to be on a 2.5 minute clock, though, okay? So
I won't take it all that time.
Perfect. Okay, Senator Salling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a letter from Maryland Waterways, and I'd like to have, if it's possible, get one of he didn't have the opportunity. He was in the hospital. And so he sent me this today. And it's a letter of favorable, and I'd like the opportunity to give it to everyone if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Let's get,
if I can bring it over
here. Yeah, just give it to Senator. That's okay. Well, we'll get it around here. Just, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Why don't you, go up there and give it. Okay, you proceed. We'll get the letter around here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to say good afternoon and thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, and committee. For the record, I'm Senator John R. Salling from the District of Baltimore County, and I'd like to talk to you about this bill, Senate Bill 301. Will expand the ability for the Department of Natural Resources, that is, to remove abandoned vessels from the Maryland waterways by providing them additional source of funding. In 2020, there was a bill, it was 219, that was passed, which gave the Department of Natural Resources greater authority to remove abandoned vessels. And that was just a good start. We were going in the right direction, which was very supportive, but the bill did not give adequate funding and provide for the natural resources to do the job necessary. That is why I'm introducing Senate Bill 301. I did have some photos, and I didn't know if they were able to be sent here to be presented, but it's literally, I went out with DNR and with Baltimore County, and we went out in the area and found literally a marina of abandoned boats. And it was just like unbelievable. And so we did submit also, just to let you know, and I think we sent this amendment here, we had an amendment with DNR, and the first thing was we did not want to take the funds from DNR. So we wanted to put in at least $1 million of appropriations from general funds and not from DNR. And as we all know, abandoned vessels are not only an eyesore, but they pose a serious environmental and safety concerns. Pollutants and other things that are costly as we know that Chesapeake is our gem. Over the years, my office have received several complaints from concerned constituents about boats being abandoned in their marinas and near their homes. In some cases, they have had trouble getting the assistance they need. It is my hope that providing the additional funds to the ENR, we will be able to move effectively and deal with this issue. I want to thank you for this opportunity to present 301, and I hope I can get a favorable report. I am more than happy to take any questions, and also we have an expert that will be able to explain a little bit more about this bill. Thank you.
Yeah, Vice Chair has a quick question before we go to our
Just a
witness.
statement. Senator Salling, you weren't sure about the photos. Jarrett Hartsock, you guys in our online calendar folder posted 9 different photos. So they are in as 9 different pieces of testimony, but you can see them and they are available online.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Vice Chair, it's a great opportunity to check out and see what's going on, so thank you for that.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Peter McCardle. I'm the owner of Kentmore Marina on the Eastern Shore, have been the owner for over 21 years. When I first bought the marina, there were 15 abandoned boats. The senator said he found a marina that has all abandoned boats. Every marina in Maryland and other places near the bay and the shore have abandoned boats. It is a tremendous financial drain on the marina, but even worse, it's a tremendous drain on the environment. Those boats, whether they are abandoned on water or abandoned on land, are not being taken care of by the owner. Thus, what happens is the village becomes full with gasoline or oil. The rain comes, it goes on land, goes on the bay. It's a tremendous problem. We started at Kentmore, a towboat company, along with a transportation company, where it got so bad, we're right out front on the bay, where we'd go get boats, pick them up so they wouldn't sink, so we could fix them on the land so they're not an environment hazard. It is a tremendous problem. Tell you one instance, we have a volunteer fire department on the island, United Communities. Their fire boat sank. They called us. Took my crew 6 hours to get the boat off the floor and took it around to Kentmore, and we were able to salvage it so it didn't cause an environmental problem. This is a huge concern. It's only going to get worse. What happened during the pandemic is people went ahead and bought new boats and abandoned the boats that they had, that they even had still owed money on, and they're sitting at marinas or in the water causing concern, and no one's paying attention to them. Not the owner, just the marina owner trying to make sure they're not an environmental hazard. I can't say it any more dramatically, but if there's any questions, please, I'm ready.
Okay, any questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 301. Thank you, Senator Salling, and that brings us
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
to our final bill of the day. Senator Jackson, why don't you come on back up here? I'm going to call up, I've got a panel, so I'll just reel off the names and see who we got here. Daniel Donahue, is Mr. Donahue here? Yes, sir. Okay, come on up. Stephen Keithley? Mr. Keithley here? Okay. Mr. Miles? They've got Mr. Miles here. Mary Beth Colonies? Yes, sorry about that. Apologize. Luke Muldoon. And then I see Lindsay Thompson in the back, but you're sort of not part of the formal panel, so you can come up next after this group, okay? Lindsay? Okay, Senator Jackson, we're here on the final bill of the day, Senate Bill 272, and other than yourself, everybody's going to be on the 2.5-minute clock, and then we do have some unfavorable testimony. So, Senator Jackson?
Sir, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, members of the EEE Committee. For the record, Senator Michael Jackson, District 27, on behalf of Senate Bill 272. Senate Bill 272 allows deer hunting on private property each Sunday of the deer bow bow season. Additionally, it reduces the required safety distance for archery hunters from 150 yards to 50 yards from a dwelling house, residence, church, or any other building or camp occupied by humans. Look, I live in the southern part of Prince George's County, and in that rural area, we have overabundance of deer. With the recent snowstorm, the animals have to eat, even with the shrubbery around the house. They don't typically eat that type of shrubbery, but when they can't find anything else, they come up and they ravage. But they also produce, and so it gets pretty crowded down there with those of us who live in that rural area of the county. It becomes a danger from accidents with the deer, as well as, shrubberies and other vegetation for the houses and also for the businesses there. We've tried to bring this bill before this committee for the last few years, and we have modified it, and we have made changes, but the most important change is that we're talking about private property. We're talking about private property with folks who are licensed to do what they need to do. They can't come on my property unless they're allowed to come on my property, so they don't have access to the public lands that are there. So we're asking for a favorable report. It's sorely needed. It's another tool in the toolbox to help us manage the deer population in that area of the county. So I will turn it over and definitely stand for any questions. But we have some folks here who participate in the activity as well as understand the business a little more than I do. So with that, we ask for a favorable report, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, who would you like to see go? I'll let you pick. Who wants to go
Dan.
next?
Dan, you go.
Okay, put the mic in front of you.
And there's also, we're sitting up here with this military book and for our new chair of the caucus, Dan's a retired Marine, just so you all know that in the room.
Okay, very good. Okay, sir, tell us who you are, and then you're,
Daniel Donahue.
Everybody's going to be on a 2.5 minute clock, okay? There you
Got
go.
it. Daniel Donahue. I'm the president of the Prince George's County Farm Bureau Incorporated. We support this legislation for the damage that deer do to cropland. Minimum of 15% damage to cropland by wildlife throughout the state. Also, the deer cut or affect the woodlands negatively by taking out a lot of the undergrowth. And they're a safety hazard for public safety, all the vehicle accidents. We strongly encourage you to please pass this bill. I know that it's a private property. It's not on any public land. It only apply to private property. So if anybody has some concerns about it, you need to talk to the landowner. But Prince George's County Farm Bureau supports this 100%. Thank you very much for your time and service.
Okay, why don't we, sir, you've got a mic right in front of you, right next to Mr. Donahue. Why don't you go next, and then we'll end up with Mr. Miles. We'll go down the aisle, and we'll come back to Mr. Miles.
Okay. My name is Steve Keithley. I am the founder of Hunters of Maryland, LLC. I grew up in Prince George's County, started my hunting career in Prince George's County. I've archery hunted for 60, 65 years throughout Mexico, Canada, and the United States. I've killed a lot of animals. I've done a lot of crop damage with archery. It's a very effective tool in these suburban areas to reduce deer herds appropriately. Most of the animals that I've taken over the years with archery, when my freezer's full, I donate them to a program called Farmers and Hunters Feed the Hungry, FHFH, if you are not familiar with it. It's a great source of using the protein. What happens in a lot of these suburban areas like Prince George's County, with 150-yard archery setback, it creates sanctuary areas. That's a common term among biologists and also hunters. And what I mean sanctuary is, with the current 150-yard safety zone, there's many areas of Prince George's County you cannot hunt, at least under the laws, you can't hunt them. This creates lots of excess deer population. It's a biological fact that white-tailed deer can double their population every 4 years if unchecked. That's not my opinion. That's wildlife biologists. They will tell you that. There are 13 counties in the state that have reduced from 150-yard safety zone down to 50-yard safety zone. Montgomery County is one of those. Currently, the last few years, Montgomery County, with opening up some Sunday hunting, reducing their safety zone with archery to 50 yards, they are archery killing more deer in Montgomery County than they do with firearm. There are no issues. There have not been safety issues in the state with 50 yards setback. I will probably get some resistance from the Horse Council people. I have never I had one instance of encountering horse people on private property in Charles County, and it was a very pleasant exchange. The landowner set the policy. The landowner said, you guys can hunt my property down on Mountain Victoria Road in Charles County. We had a pleasant exchange with the horse people. Everything worked out fine. We had permission. They had permission for a few Saturdays during the archery season. Thank you for your time. I'm here to testify on behalf of support for this Sunday hunting bill. Thank you.
Would you pass it down? Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. My name is Mary Beth Kalinich, and I'm here today on behalf of the Maryland Bowhunter Society. MBS has been advocating for the archery community in Maryland since 1977. We aim to promote and provide safety and education for all people who wish to enjoy the outdoors. Archery is considered the safest form of hunting, and there are many reasons why, but one thing I want to add is bow hunting is not easy. It takes tremendous dedication, precision, practice, and time. Each minute you spend in the woods increases the chance of success. And that success is crucial in the efforts to maintain a healthy deer herd. And healthy is the key word because that is what we all want. And we know what happens when the land can't sustain the animals. And this opens the door to much more invasive means like nighttime crop damage shooting and hiring of sharpshooters to come in and take over. Hunting has been proven to be the most effective tool we have at maintaining a balance, especially in a state like ours that has very few natural predators. I want to reiterate again that this is for private land only. I'm speaking as a certified trail guide and therapeutic riding instructor who rides year-round on public and private land, and I will say we have never had an unfriendly or unsafe encounter on that land. But this is for private only. These landowners have poured tremendous amounts of time and money and resources into their land, and they should have the right to choose whether or not they would like to hunt it on Sundays and to get their families involved too. Because let's face it, these kids nowadays are just as busy as we are, and the free time they have is spent inside and stuck to technology. But there are too many lessons that technology can't provide. These can only be taught from trusted mentors and family members who are willing to take the time to pass on these skills and traditions. Allowing more access and more opportunities will not only benefit hardworking families, farmers, and help keep communities safe, but it also ensures the longevity of the land and these beautiful animals we share it with. Thank you for your time, and we hope for a favorable outcome.
Okay, thank you. Sir?
Good afternoon. I'm Luke Muldoon. I was born and raised in Prince George's County. I'm the fourth generation of hunter from Prince George's County. As you guys know, Prince George's County has changed drastically in the last 10 years, let alone the last 20 years or 30 years. As this development continues, deer are adaptive creatures. They're going to end up in areas that they feel safe, and these areas currently are areas that we cannot target them as hunters. As a management tool, by reducing this safety zone from 150 yards to 50 yards, we can target these deer and manage them as a resource. During the course of a work week, it can be difficult to get out to hunt, so us as hunters a lot of times rely on weekends for our recreational activities. Sunday hunting can open up a whole nother day of hunting for people that a lot of times now have 6-day work weeks. In addition, to add on to this Sunday hunting, there is already Sunday hunting occurring in Prince George's County. Crop damage permits are open on Sundays in Prince George's County. there are already a lot of deer being harvested on Sundays in Prince George's County. So what we need to do is give these private property owners the right to decide what they want to do on their own private property. That's all we're asking for today. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miles. Why don't you do clean up here, and then we'll take questions.
Mr. Chairman, again, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, Bill Miles on behalf of the Hunters of Maryland. There could be so much more said if you didn't have 2 minutes per person, but as been a former committee staffer for a lot of years, I know the importance of a time cap. And we want to start off initially by thanking the good senator here for putting it in the bill and the support of the Maryland, the Prince George's County Farm Bureau. Sunday hunting is an emotional issue, but we crossed that bridge a long time ago, back in 2002. It came on as 2 days for a year, and for 12 counties, and now it's all counties except Prince George's, Howard, and Baltimore. And these are local decisions. There's no question. It's an emotional issue, but at the same time, you'll hear that some user groups feel that if they're out there doing what they do on a Sunday, and there is a demented hunter somewhere close by, that somehow or another their life is in jeopardy. And look at the statistics. There are no documented cases of any, not only a fatality, I mean, there might be some whatever, but I mean, there's been no one ever seriously hurt on a horseback while hunting on Sundays in the state of Maryland. And your county, Prince George's County, is a county that really, you know, you talk about the ecological, the biological carrying capacity. Well, unfortunately, DNR and MDA are not here to testify, you know, today because, you know, it's considered a local bill and the second floor says no local bills. But if you ask DNR and MDA that really know this deer situation is good, if not better than this collective group, you'll know just how important this bill is. Emotions aside, it makes sense to control your deer population in the most cost-effective, sensitive way possible, and that's hunting. We're not talking firearms here. We're just talking archery. And our testimony's there, and I will close, Mr. Chairman. At the back of your testimony from the Hunters of Maryland is a chart. And we stumbled across this chart. And what this chart says is that in 2015, which is the most recent data available from the Animal Control Department within Prince George's County and State Highway, that 796 deer carcasses were removed from the roads in Prince George's County that did not include the 254 that the State Highway Administration removed. So we're talking over 1,000 deer 10 years ago, and you can bet that if they did this study today, it'd be a heck of a lot more than 1,000 deer. It's a good issue. And private property rights, whoever wants to be there, private will and enter makes that decision. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to Senator Hester. Senator Watson from Prince George.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just curious, do you guys have a local letter from the Prince George's County delegation?
We are meeting tomorrow night, so thank you.
We're going to go to Senator Watson, and we'll go back over to the other side. Senator Watson?
Thank you. Glad to know I have a meeting tomorrow night. Let me try to take the emotion out, because yes, this bill has come before us quite a while, and the Marlboro Hunt Club happens to be in my district. So I think I understand the issue here, but let me ask a couple questions. Those of you here, how many of you still reside in Prince George's County? Just one? Thank you for your service, sir. I'm so disappointed in the rest of you.
I work there every day.
I understand.
Calvert County, we're close.
Everybody starts off in Prince George's. Do any of you own horses? You do? Okay. And so, and this is only for private property, right? And I'm obligated to ask a question because a previous bill was talking about reduction of the safety zone. And you said this has happened in other locales and there have been no issues of any problems, right?
13 counties.
13 counties. And so, in anticipation of my friends from the Hunt Club, I think what the deal is, now that I'm listening to it, is that in certain parts of Prince George's County, we have contiguous private residences. And on a certain day, they kind of operate where everyone has kind of, you know, explicit rights to take their horses around for a, long trail. And so I think the issue is that if independent private owners can now say yay or nay, then that reduces their ability to run their horses. I believe that's what we're going to hear. And just for my own satisfaction, I like stats and facts. Given this one additional day to use archery, what do we reasonably expect, in terms of reduction in the deer population?
DNR, I believe, came forward and indicated 50 to 100 additional deer harvested on Sundays. I don't agree with that for the reasons I stated before, with increasing access to property. We currently have sanctuary areas, as I tried to explain earlier, 150 yards. There's many areas of Prince George's County you cannot hunt because you can't get 150 yards from an occupied dwelling. I personally feel, with my experience archery hunting, we could open up thousands of acres to manage these deer in these sanctuary areas. So DNR's projection of 50 to 100 doesn't take into account we're opening up thousands of acres, additional acres, to access these deer that have not been hunted, and they have continued to multiply.
Because you're shortening the safety.
Yes, yes, exactly. And again, I'd like to reiterate, there have, and DNR, I think, can just, or back me up on this, there has not been safety issues with that. The 13 counties that have gone to 50 yards, on archery, an arrow just doesn't go very far.
Are any of you members of the Marlboro Hunt Club? Anybody?
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, before we leave Prince George's County, we're going to go to Center Augustine. Let's stay in Prince George's County, and then we'll go across the.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there restrictions from Monday to Saturday?
No.
Restrictions on the safety zone, you mean?
No, on the hunting.
No. Right now, during archery season, Monday through Saturday is open to hunting.
So you got 6 days out of 7 already. How many hunters are there?
I believe my numbers are correct. There's 88,000 hunters in the state. I think 50,000 by archery stamps, bow hunting stamps, I think.
How many of them are Prince Georgians?
I don't have that info. I know I have a lot of friends that hunt in Prince George's County.
I'm not so familiar with all that number.
Yeah,
so.
I have no idea what the numbers are that hunt in Prince George's. DNR could tell you how many licenses are sold in Prince George's County, but I don't know how many people hunt in Prince George's.
Right, because they probably, even if they live there, they may go to other locations.
Exactly.
But you would agree that there's not too many hunters in Prince George's County?
I don't agree with that, sir.
Okay, well, I live there.
There's
you
a
don't.
lot of hunters.
So
there's a lot of
I live there and you don't.
Yeah. Well,
right. You don't. Okay. You said that. You already answered that.
I have a lot of friends that hunt in Prince George's County. I can't give you the numbers. But there are a lot of people that hunt, and they would.
Would you agree that the portion of Prince George's County that we're talking about it's been changing? It has been becoming far more suburban, and so that there will be a lot more people whose homes and things like that will become a lot closer to these areas that you're talking about?
Oh, there's no doubt Prince George's County's changed. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up.
Like you moved, you left, right?
I'm just going back, if you will allow me to, go back to when the 50s and 60s, I started hunting in Prince George's County. It is not the same now. There were no deer in Prince George's County back in those days, okay?
Okay.
Senator, may I ask you?
Of course.
Since I live in Prince George's County, I live a half a mile on the same property that I grew in the house I grew up in.
That's great.
And we have it in hunting. I have hunters on our place for deer with firearms. I've had it for years, always had that. I raise cattle, so I'm concerned about animals and hunters and that sort of thing.
Yep.
And we've had this, and you have to work with it, but there's more animals. There's more deer than there are today. First time I saw the deer on our property, I was in the 5th grade. And that's on 205 acres. And now I can probably see a dozen almost every afternoon. If I even happen to look up, like the dog doesn't bark when he sees them. So yeah, I'm in the county. I deal with this, and it's a hazard on the roads. It's a hazard for woodlands. I'm on the forestry board for the county, and it really is tearing up the woodlands. In fact, I was a runner-up for the Maryland Tree Farmer of the Year this year. So,
congratulations.
Excuse me for waving my flag, but just say I have a vested interest.
So do I.
Yes, sir, you do. We're together. Yeah. Come on down to Akakeek, and I'll take you to B&J's.
Yeah, okay. Well, I spend a lot of time all over the county. It's not just Akakeek, and nor is this piece of legislation just Akakeek.
Well, I understand that, sir, but it's in the whole eastern, the watersheds people forget about along the Patuxent on the eastern side of the county, and all up through into Oxon Hill.
And so what I would say to you, sir, is that I really love, you're absolutely right, I love to go on hikes and walks along with the hundreds of thousands of other Prince Georgians that would appreciate to have one day that they don't have to be thinking about the people who are hunting that are out there. Hundreds of thousands of us that do love all that land that you're talking about. Well, what do you do with that?
But it's private property, sir.
We're talking about private property where hunters have written permission to hunt.
You've already talked about it. From what I see, I understand. So this is not a one-way conversation in the sense that we have this discussion about bow, but we also have it about firearms. We just do. Like we don't separate those two things. We do one thing, the next thing is, you do the next. Like that's just how these things go. That's just how these things go, right? And furthermore, I see what you guys are talking about where with regards to the bow don't go that far, but 50, that's a short distance. Now you're talking about property owners, other property owners who, maybe they don't want to have it. That's a lot shorter than the current distance that you have in the bill. Would you agree?
Well, it's definitely shorter. 150 yards is not 150 yards. But again, the issues with 13 counties, there are no issues with 13 counties that have gone to the 50-yard archery zone. There's no issues. There are no issues.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Are these delegation meetings streamed? I might have to, looking forward to watching. Okay, we're going to leave Prince George's County. We're going to go Center Washington, Carosa, and then Brooks, and then we'll see what happens. And then we've got some additional witnesses signed up. So, okay, Center Washington.
So, thank you, Senator Jackson. And yes, we've had this conversation multiple years, and I haven't really participated, but I've been trying to learn a little more about it. And so archery, with regard to federal standards, and the U.S. Forest Service considers bow the same as guns, right? It's a firearm. Is that correct?
No, archery hunting is not considered the same as firearms.
So so when on the U.S. Forest Service website that says all firearms and bows with arrows should be cased and unloaded while in recreation areas or on public lands, and discharging a firearm, including a bow and an arrow, is prohibited within 150 feet. Is there a different type of, and this isn't, I'm not being sarcastic, is there a different type of bow that doesn't include the bow and arrow that is considered a firearm on federal land?
Does that comment or restriction apply to public ground or public institutions? What does that apply to?
It was just, this is talking about hunting.
I think it sounded like they combine firearms and anything that shoots a projectile, whether it's bow and arrow or whatever, but I'm not sure in what context they're using that.
Right. I was just sharing it.
Sure.
Thinking about that the revision you made was to integrate something that was not necessarily universally considered a firearm, but I was just sharing that it is, with regard to federal regs, that it is. And then I think the other question about the bill is that private lands are, in Prince George's County, are private lands interspersed with public land? In other words, are there any private lands that are adjacent to public lands?
I'm sure there are.
Yes.
Some parkland and whatnot.
So, like I said, so we're not able to create the kind of sanctuary away from public lands because the Forest Service specifically kind of warns about it and just says private land is interspersed with public land. And that they maintain the 150-yard because public and private land are interspersed with one another. So I just didn't know if you were
Well, I can just speak if I might, Madam Senator. So where I live in Brandywine, and we have a park that's not too far from where we live, a couple miles up the street from where I live. But my property, I could actually allow, if this legislation passed, I could actually allow, folks to come on my property. I have enough deer. I could actually have those folks come on to my property and not have a problem with them being 50 yards out from where I have 4 acres of land. I would not have a problem at all. But there are folks who have hundreds of acres of land that are there, and there are a couple of parks here and there. But the key is the property owners there who allow hunters on the other days to come on are very well versed in, the surrounding areas. So, and about I'm not sure where what you were reading earlier. So my granddaughter she does bow, and she did it in high school, and so I've been to a couple of her meets up in Baltimore County and other places, and when they're getting ready to bring up the next relay, it's for safety reasons, the person will say all archers approach the line, but make sure that your bows are not in the same location as your whatever it's called. I don't know. I'm not a hunter, but that's for safety reasons. So what you read was just like when you're doing the range with the firearm. You don't have the two together. So
thank you, and I understand. I'm generally trying to better understand the position and what the testimony was. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chief.
Okay, Senator Brooks on the Prince George's County Local Delegation Bill. Question?
Okay. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, that's a question. Anybody can take the question. The primary inspiration here, is it recreational or food or management? Because I've sort of heard all three.
All three.
All of the above?
Yeah, there's a sport to it, as has been explained to me, but also to manage, as well as, there are the clubs that are associated, that are in these areas that do that. They actually donate food all the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And if I may, sir, Senator,
yes.
Saying part of the Farm Bureau, it's mainly the crop damage they cause.
Mm-hmm.
We can reduce some of that crop damage, and also like when they go in, even the damage to the woodlands, that affects your whole soil and water.
Mm-hmm.
Adverse effects on soil and water. How we have the nutrient management plan here in Maryland, the soil conservation districts. You want to keep, they don't want to have that runoff going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say it's more of just a stop loss.
Right, okay. And I'd say probably one of the things that brings just a little bit of concern, I think a lot of my colleagues just mentioned it, that's reducing the range from 150 down to 50, because I read somewhere where like a modern bow can shoot up to 400 yards. Now, average, they say about maybe between 30 to 60, yes, the average bow, but a modern one can go up to 400 yards.
I can't answer that.
And that is, that's assuming that's on a straight line most of the time. And archers who are utilizing smaller tracts of land are going to understand you will be in a bow stand, you will be in an elevated platform. So the flight of the arrow does not continue beyond your target zone. And for someone like me, I would never shoot outside of 20 yards. Most ethical hunters are going to understand that they are going to shoot less than 50 yards. But yes, technology-wise, you're right. They have come a long way where they can do that. But having the elevated platform and the decrease in the shot zone and the distance is what does add to the safety of the archery element.
All right, thanks, Chair.
Okay, any additional questions for this panel? Okay, thank you, folks. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Lindsay Thompson, why don't you come up here? You're also signed up favorable. Then we do have some unfavorables signed up. So Lindsay Thompson from the Maryland Grain Produce Association signed up favorable, and then we'll pivot to some unfavorables. And you're going to have 2.5 minutes, okay?
I promise I won't use all of it. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Thompson, here today on behalf of Maryland Grain Producers Association in support of this legislation. You have in my written testimony, but just to put some numbers to it, back in 2012, when the National Agricultural Statistics Service did a survey of crop damage, they surveyed about $10 million of crop damage, 75% of that from deer. If you looked at that in 2025 dollars, that would be about $13.36 million. Most of the farmers that we have talked to in the 2024 season lost anywhere between 15 and 30% of their grain crops to deer damage specifically, with a little bit of bear damage out there in Western Maryland. Apparently they are very destructive when they want to roll around in your cornfields. So by adding these additional bow-only Sundays on private property, we do believe that it will increase the ability of hunters specifically who cannot utilize crop depredation permits to assist with the control of these deer populations. There was some questions around the number of days. So in general, deer season is going to run from the first Saturday in September through the last day of January. So that's a little less than 5 out of the 12 total months of the year and 21 out of the 52 Sundays. So the hunting season doesn't go all year. We're not talking about every single Sunday, just specifically during the hunting season. And so we think by having it being private property only during the hunting season, and archery, that's a good compromise with the other users of recreational space. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Thompson? Okay, Senator Watson.
And I don't know why I haven't asked this before. Are there any positive benefits of having a deer population at all?
So I guess there's a little bit of a conflict there with my personal versus my professional opinion. So my husband and I are big hunters as well. And so there is definitely a positive ecological and recreational benefit from having a healthy deer herd population, right? What that is, I can't exactly tell you. We've actually requested some technical assistance from the Department of Natural Resources to tell us what is a healthy deer herd per acre. Like, how many deer can I have per acre? And
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is that I don't like either of these, but snakes eat rodents, right?
Sure.
But then we have this deer. Is the deer analogous to a snakehead fish? Like, just no value, it just eats up stuff, and we just want to rid ourselves totally of it? And if we got rid of every deer today, would that be a net positive for the state of Maryland?
I don't believe so. I think that there is a sustainable deer herd because white-tailed deer are a native species to Maryland, whereas something like a blue catfish or a snakehead are non-native invasive species, so they're not supposed to be here in the first place. We just need to be able to effectively manage them in order to keep their population both healthy for them and also sustainable for the economy of the state.
But you wouldn't be upset if they went extinct?
I personally would probably be a little bit upset, actually. But, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions for Ms. Thompson? Okay, seeing none. We do have 2 witnesses in person unfavorable and 2 virtual. I'm not sure about our virtual. Okay, so Christy Claggett here.
Yeah.
And then our other unfavorable in person is Barbara Solner-Webb.
Can you do the web people first? There's like a Jane Siegler and a Leslie Long. Can you do them first?
Well, you say the web people. I've got.
The web,
okay, so
yeah.
Christy Claggett here. Okay, we're going to go back.
I'm the in person. There's
Okay.
Jane, and
Okay,
then
so
there's
what-
Paula Southern, and there's Leslie Long.
Well, I
Can we
only
do
got
them
2
first?
signed up here. Okay, Paula.
And we'll wrap
okay,
it
we
up.
have 3. Okay, I stand corrected. Okay, you want to take the virtual
We want to take
first?
the virtual first. Let's start
Okay,
with Jane
that's fine.
Siegler.
Okay, so we'll let's start with Jane Sigler, and then we'll go to the other 2 witnesses, and then
we'll wrap it up.
you guys can wrap up. Okay, that's fine. So, Ms. Sigler, each of you are going to have 2.5 minutes, and again, you're signed up unfavorable on Senate Bill 272.
Jane, unmute.
Jane, Well, she's not muted. Jane, can you talk? Test 1, 2, 3?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, we hear
I
you.
apologize. The call just dropped and I had to jump back on again. I think I'm Jane Sigler for the record here, representing the Maryland Horse Council, which is the membership-based trade association that represents the entire horse industry in Maryland. I think most members of the committee are familiar with our long-held position about Sunday hunting and all of our many reasons why we are opposed to it. You can find that in our written testimony. I won't take up the time to do it here. I do want to respond to a couple of things that were said by the proponents. And one thing is, it is clear that deer overpopulation can present health, public safety, and economic problems in Maryland. However, Sunday hunting is demonstrably not an effective solution to that problem. Almost all Maryland counties have vastly expanded Sunday hunting over the past decade or so, and yet the deer harvest has fallen from over 100,000 in 2008, 2009, and 2010 to under 73,000 in the last year for which I could find a record, which was 2023-24. And DNR did a survey in 2018 in which almost 60% of the hunters said that they would not harvest more deer if Sundays were available. So therefore, Sunday hunting is not an effective deer management tool. It's rather a hunter convenience tool. And convenience is nice, but it's something that should be available to all constituents equitably, not just to one small segment. The number of licensed hunters in Maryland is only about 2% of the state's population. And according to an economic impact study that was done nationally last year, there are 700,000 horse enthusiasts in Maryland. I want to also talk about the private versus public property distinction. I think some of the live witnesses have some stories to tell about that. But the fact of the matter is that projectiles do not respect property boundaries. And I can tell you, we filed with our testimony I think 9-page report culled from DNR's own data showing hunting accidents between 2007 and 2023, which clearly show that it's not entirely safe to be out in the woods at the same time as hunters. As far as crop damage is concerned, yes, that's clearly a problem. Again, recreational hunting is not the solution. There are other tools available. There are crop damage permits and et cetera. So we request an unfavorable report. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll go to Paula. Why don't you go next? Paula.
Yes.
Southorn.
Hi.
Yes.
And
then we'll go to our final witness.
Yeah.
Yes, go on.
Yes, you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I also feel like Jane does about the deer hunting on Sunday. I really think the deer hunters have enough time to take care of any of the excess deer we have. And Sunday is really a time for recreational people to come out in their own country and in the parks to be able to hike, to ride their horses, to do the various activities that a lot of them don't have the opportunity to do during the week, that the weekends and especially Sunday are the only days that they have to enjoy that. Because if the hunters are out on Saturday, then Sunday's the only day that they can feel truly safe when they're out doing those activities. So we feel like the deer hunters have enough time to take care of a lot of the deer now, and that we don't get the time for our recreational activities without being worried about the deer hunters being out there and either being shot by a gun or possibly a bow and arrow. So just kind of taking that into consideration, and hopefully you'll consider not continuing the deer hunting on into Sundays for us that want to be out there on Sundays. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Long?
Leslie?
Leslie Long? Can you hear me?
Doesn't look like it.
What's that?
Can you try talking to her again?
Yeah. Leslie, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Oh, we can't hear you.
We can't, yeah. trying to fix her computer. Paula lives in Prince George's County, the one that just spoke, and so does Leslie.
Yeah.
Okay, unfortunately,
We're not going to be getting, Leslie, you got to.
well, here, how about this? Why don't we go to the two of you?
Okay.
First of all, any questions for our first two virtual witnesses from anybody here on the panel? Okay, seeing none, why don't we go to our live witnesses, and meanwhile, if Ms. Long can
try and sort it out.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean. In person.
Leslie has a farm in Prince George's where she people come and rent a cottage.
I understand. Okay.
So anyway, that's
why
what
don't
she
we,
wanted to talk
let's
about.
go to the two of you,
Okay.
both signed up unfavorable, and each of you have 2.5
Yes.
minutes. Why don't you start?
Thank you. Okay. So good afternoon, committee. I ask you to oppose Senate Bill 272. I'm Christy Claggett, a farmer, equestrian, Maryland Horse Council member, and a resident of Harwood, Maryland, but I own 2 farms in Prince George's County, which I allow hunting and recreational pursuits by my neighbors. They often bird watch and walk their dogs. Thus, I'm not anti-hunting, but I am pro-sharing of the outdoor resource. I feel it is a common sense approach to have non-hunting safe Sundays where we all can be outdoors in the woods or walking our property boundaries without being afraid that there are weapons near us. The principle of private property is surrounded by other private properties and by public properties, and what you do on your private property affects your neighbor. So if you have weapons that are arrows, they do not know property lines, and thus I would not let my children or my pets out when there are hunters, and this will be just another day that they will not be out. So the modern crossbow can go 500 yards. The compound bow can go 80 to 100 yards. That is very far and very fast, and they are powerful. So personally, I am not for 150-yard safety distance being taken away. There's also one of the DNR hunting accidents reports in 2019 stated that in Washington County, a crossbow bolt went through an SUV while it was parked in the victim's driveway. So let's look at Prince George's County, which is much more populated. In fact, it's the 2nd most populated county in Maryland. It also has the 4th largest amount of horses, 7,000 animals. It has 770 stables and a total equine capital expenditure of $13.6 million. The majority of Maryland recreational riders are trail riders that use a multiple intersecting trail network between public and private lands. This bill affects 21 Sundays, September to January. Riders use Sundays to avoid hunters and to recreate. Boarding stables in PG depend on their people to be able to get out and recreate when they want to. So there is no urgent need to have Sunday hunting. DNR says the deer population is stabilized. Sunday hunting does not kill more deer overall. It just kills more on Sundays because that's when they go out. So Sunday hunting is a convenience for hunters, which are 2% of the population. So please do not support this bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go. Let you proceed.
You get a thing next to you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, we got
We
Leslie.
can hear you, Ms. Long. Why don't you hold off? We're going to take the other.
Go ahead with Leslie.
Okay. Leslie Long, you've made it back, and we're going to take you now. 2 minutes. You're signed up unfavorable. Start.
Okay. My name is Leslie Long, and I oppose SB 272. I've been a resident for Prince George's County for over 30 years and live with my husband in Upper Marlboro, where we own a 36-acre horse farm. Sunday is one day that I truly have use of my own property. Our land and surrounding property is hunted by my husband, many of his friends, and others from September to January. My husband often warns me not to ride or take the dog for a walk during deer season because he's nervous that someone may mistake us for a deer. And remember, someone can be on a private property line of a park and still hunt on their private property. This bill seems to favor deer hunters over the county's own residents. I'm curious how many Prince George's County residents are deer hunters. The bill states that the economic value could impact the county, but not only do I live here and pay taxes, but I also operate an Airbnb. Many of my renters are looking for a place to get away and enjoy the outdoors. Unfortunately, I tell them to not walk in the woods during deer season. I have reviews that talk about how beautiful this county is, and I think that has a much greater economic impact. Since bag limits of deer won't be affected and farmers can already kill as many deer as they want to mitigate crop loss, how is this helping our residents? I know this bill will not allow hunters on Sunday in our state and local parks, but deer hunting does already affect the multi-use of our parks. For instance, Merkle Wildlife Sanctuary closes trails due to deer hunting. Billingsley, which is part of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, won't allow me to bring my horse onto that property because they have six deer hunters that they have reserved that spot for. And I don't know where they live, but I'm guessing not Prince George's County. I have also had hunters question whether I can ride in a Quasco farm, which is also part of the MNC PPC. So the truth is that the parks are not multi-use. They are definitely skewed in favor of deer hunters now. But what about our children? In a world where parents are already worried about too much screen time and too little play time, this bill will limit outdoor play even more, especially in the rural tier. We're already one of the most populated counties in the state, and there is less open space for the public to enjoy. Recent studies show that unstructured time outside improves mental and physical well-being. By adding Sundays, you're taking away the one day a week that children can enjoy the outdoors safely, even though outdoor play is proven to decrease obesity and increase overall health. So your actions today will affect your children and grandchildren and to prevent them from being outside for the 5 months of the year when the weather is often best. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any questions for Ms. Long? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go back to our in-person witness, the final witness of the day.
Hi, thank you. I'm Barbara Solner-Webb, owner of a lovely 12-acre backyard farm in West Laurel, actually the northernmost point in Prince George's County. So again this year, Senator Michael Jackson has proposed a Prince George's County Sunday hunting bill. So again, we average citizens are here to testify that it's completely unfair of the well-funded hunt industry, which already has 6 days a week for lethal shooting in the outdoors, to try to get the 7th day, which traditionally has been reserved as the only day of the week for the other 98% of the population who are not hunters, to enjoy our lovely green areas without fear of being shot at. Back 25 years ago, when Sunday hunting was first being seriously looked at, then Governor Paris Glendening expressed precisely those sentiments in a well-funded, impassioned plea to retain the one safe outside day. And it's even more true today when the value of outdoor exercise and communing with nature is even better exercised. I will not reiterate the statistics that Jane Siegler's data have presented and what other speakers have said already. I want to note that I'm one of the many outdoor enthusiasts who has been shot at by recreating. Actually shot at on 3 separate occasions, including an arrow zipping less than 2 feet from my ear. It's not a fun experience. Evidently, none of those, quote, great hunters recognized that my white riding helmet, orange safety vest, or white horse below me don't exactly look like a 5-point deer. One of my favorite delegates here in Annapolis had a similar experience being shot at by recreating in an area park, again, being shot that the weapon fired on private land, but going across onto the parkland. Please recognize that if hunters are so unsuccessful in the 6 days a week they already have to endanger the non-hunter outdoor enthusiasts, why do they think that a 7th day will solve anything more than get rid of us outdoor enthusiasts? And second, in much of Prince George's, the private lands are small, and as many people have already said, that the arrows will fly over the edge onto the other area. So please keep Sunday safe for the vast majority of the population, us non-hunters, who want to be safe to recreate outside 1 day a week, on the day that the hunters don't claim their land. And it may be true that the area where Senator Jackson lives is rural enough to allow hunting, but certainly the northern areas of the county that I'm familiar with, like Laurel, Greenbelt, College Park, Bowie, that have a high population density, it seems completely inappropriate and dangerous to take away this last day.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for our last witness or any of the panelists? Seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 272, and that concludes our work for today.